November 2024, The Tipping Point, a celestial storm unleashes global upheaval and new beginnings by Ambrosius Holloway. Part 3 and final.
Oceania's Awakening, a journey through the stars. The vast ocean stretches across Oceania and the South Pacific Islands, but beneath the tranquil waves, powerful undercurrents of change stir. As November 2024 approaches, the skies above align in a symphony of transformation, driven by astrological forces that resonate deeply with the region's political, economic, and environmental struggles. This is no ordinary month. It's a time when the planets conspire to reshape the destiny of these island nations, pressing them toward a future that balances resilience with reckoning. November 1, 2024, the Scorpio Sun and New Moon trine Saturn in Pisces, sextile Mercury. Whispers of transformation. Oceania stands at the precipice of change, where the Sun and New Moon in Scorpio, entwined with Saturn in Pisces, stir the winds of transformation. Scorpio's investigative nature digs deep into the political and economic bedrock of these island nations, while Saturn's disciplined hand demands structure amidst the turbulence. Together, they push the region to confront its most pressing challenge, climate change. From the shores of Fiji to the hills of Vanuatu, the conversations about survival are no longer just whispers. They echo through government halls and international forums. Saturn in Pisces, ruler of oceans, places an unyielding focus on water, urging leaders to devise long-term strategies for rising seas and eroding coastlines. In quiet rooms, far from the public eye, global powers negotiate lifelines. The Pacific Islands Forum and the South Pacific Regional Environment Program, SPREP, become the guardians of these closed-door talks, their role pivotal in securing international agreements that promise climate resilience and economic support. Yet, like the shadowy depths of the ocean, Scorpio's influence ensures that these discussions remain veiled until the treaties are announced. Only then will the world glimpse the gravity of these negotiations. Economically, the region's lifeblood, foreign aid and trade agreements, enters a period of reconstruction. Global financial instability sends ripples through Oceania, where nations brace for renegotiated deals tied to sustainable development. Australia and New Zealand step forward, their influence growing, though their support may come with hidden strings attached. Beneath Scorpio's watchful gaze, these conditions could spark quiet dissent among island leaders, wary of sovereignty slipping through their fingers. November 3, 2024, Mercury enters Sagittarius, voices of advocacy rise. The mood shifts as Mercury strides into Sagittarius, bringing with it a fresh breeze of diplomacy and broader horizons. This is a time for Oceania to raise its voice on the global stage, no longer merely a spectator in the battle against climate change, but an active participant. Discussions expand beyond the immediate, encompassing the legal frameworks needed to protect marine resources and territorial rights, critical as warming seas encroach upon their shores. Sagittarius, the archer, casts its hopeful eye toward the future, aiming high with the promise of educational reform. Remote Pacific islands, once isolated by geography, may now connect through the digital realm. Online education programs take root, providing young minds with the knowledge to tackle emerging challenges, renewable energy, sustainable tourism, and technological advancements. Yet, the idealism of Sagittarius may push some nations beyond their reach, setting lofty goals that may prove difficult to meet. It is here that balance must be struck, where aspirations align with the harsh realities of limited resources and global inequalities. As Mercury in Sagittarius fans the flames of advocacy, these island nations stand tall, not as victims of the Earth's changing climate, but as champions of survival. They advocate for their place in a world that seems to forget their existence, and the world, in turn, begins to listen. A rekindled sense of unity surges across the South Pacific, where communities, governments, and grassroots movements converge to fight for their future. November 5, 2024, Mars in Leo, a fiery call to lead. As Mars roars into Leo, a fiery and regal energy surges through the political veins of Oceania and the South Pacific Islands. This isn't just a simple shift, It's a dramatic entrance, one that emboldens leaders across the region to stand tall, to be heard, and to fight for their nation's futures with a lion's roar. Mars in Leo compels these leaders to act not out of necessity, but with a sense of pride and purpose. For New Zealand, the stage is set. Mars in Leo ignites a beacon of leadership in climate diplomacy, positioning the country as a bold advocate for environmental policies that could shape the entire South Pacific's survival. Expect Wellington to push forward with audacious initiatives that place climate resilience at the forefront of global negotiations. The island nations, their fates intertwined with the ocean's rising tide, look to New Zealand as a lighthouse, guiding the conversation and driving the world's attention to the immediate threats of climate change. But in Leo's realm, the drama isn't confined to heroics. Mars in Leo, with its competitive and sometimes combative nature, could stir power struggles. The Pacific has long been the focus of geopolitical tug-of-war, and this transit will see those tensions intensify. China and Australia, two giants with vested interests in the region, may find themselves at odds, their influence challenged by local leaders who, emboldened by Leo's courage, refuse to buckle under external pressure. The assertion of sovereignty becomes paramount as island nations resist being pawns in a larger game. Bold, decisive moves are made, alliances shift, trade agreements are redefined, and new diplomatic frontiers emerge. Under the light of Leo's sun, these leaders will not be content to sit quietly. They will roar, they will fight, and they will ensure their voices echo across the global stage. November 12, 2024. Venus in Capricorn, building resilience brick by brick. As Mars stokes the flames of leadership, Venus in Capricorn enters like a steady hand on the tiller, calming the seas and grounding Oceania's next steps. Venus's entry into the industrious, disciplined sign of Capricorn brings a focus on long-term strategy and structured efforts, particularly in economic and diplomatic matters. While Mars in Leo brings bold vision, Venus in Capricorn tempers that passion with a pragmatic approach. Across the islands, financial negotiations begin to take on a more serious tone. The focus shifts to the structural foundation needed to support these nations as they grapple with natural disasters and economic vulnerabilities. Capricorn's steady, cautious energy guides leaders to make investments that will endure. Renewable energy projects and resilient infrastructure, built to withstand the ever-increasing threats of cyclones and rising sea levels, move to the top of the agenda. Venus in Capricorn urges these nations to think not just of tomorrow, but of decades ahead, and to craft economic strategies that will ensure their survival. On the diplomatic front, partnerships with international organizations such as the Asian Development Bank, ADB, and the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, ESCAP, are fortified. But Venus in Capricorn comes with a caveat. These alliances will be built on clear, strategic foundations, not sentimentality. Aid, while available, will come with strings attached. Stricter conditions are likely to accompany financial support, demanding accountability and long-term planning from Oceania's leaders. The island nations will be required to develop robust economic frameworks to secure their futures, fostering partnerships that not only support resilience-building initiatives but also provide stability amidst environmental challenges. Venus, though often associated with love and beauty, in Capricorn becomes a wise guardian of resources, reminding the South Pacific that stability, in these times, is the most precious currency. November 15, 2024. Saturn direct in Pisces, a turning tide. As Saturn stations direct in Pisces, a deep breath seems to flow through the South Pacific. The period of reflection and reassessment that characterized Saturn's retrograde is over, replaced by an urgency to act, to build, and to heal. For Oceania, where the ocean is both a lifeline and a looming threat, Saturn's shift in motion signals the start of something lasting. A chance to put long-considered plans into motion, to solidify the frameworks necessary for survival. The Pacific Islands Forum and SPREP, those guiding forces behind regional cooperation, seize this moment to move forward with climate resilience initiatives. The retrograde phase may have been a time for drafting, for negotiating, and for quiet strategy, but now the region steps into the light, ready to make the hard decisions. Healthcare systems, often stretched thin by natural disasters and geographic isolation, become a focal point. Governments work alongside international humanitarian organizations to ensure that when disaster strikes again, and it will, Oceania will be ready, not just with emergency response, but with disaster-resistant infrastructure that can weather the storms to come. Pisces, ruler of the oceans, brings an undeniable symbolism to this moment. Rising sea levels, unpredictable storms, and the fragility of water resources press these nations into action. Every step taken under Saturn's direct motion feels heavy with importance. There's no room for failure. The groundwork laid now will either be Oceania's salvation or its downfall. Full moon in Taurus, a moment of reckoning. That same day, the full moon rises in Taurus, casting its glow over the lands and seas of Oceania. This is no ordinary moon, it's a mirror, reflecting the state of resource management and financial health across the region. For nations like Fiji, Samoa, and Vanuatu, whose economies are deeply tied to agriculture, tourism, and the bounty of the ocean, this full moon shines a light on hard truths. Taurus, with its steady, grounded energy, demands a reassessment of how these resources are utilized and distributed. Are they being consumed faster than they can be replenished? Are the oceans, once teeming with life, now being overfished? As the moon illuminates these questions, governments across the region are forced to confront unsustainable practices that, left unchecked, could spell economic and environmental disaster. Yet, the path forward is not without its complications. Jupiter, retrograde in Gemini, adds an unpredictable element, stirring up potential miscommunications or even mishandling of trade agreements. In the fishing and tourism sectors, so critical to these island nations, volatility may reign. The full moon's light reveals cracks in the system that must be repaired, but with Jupiter in retrograde, some of those cracks may widen before they can be mended. Still, Taurus's influence encourages slow, steady progress. It's not about radical change but about gradual, necessary adjustments that preserve the balance between consumption and conservation. Jupiter-Saturn square, the struggle between expansion and preservation. The cosmic tension heightens as the Jupiter-Saturn square comes into full force, bringing a clash of ideals. In one corner, Jupiter and Gemini, expansive and eager to push boundaries in education, media, and law. In the other, Saturn and Pisces, cautious and grounded, whispering of restraint and the importance of preservation. For Oceania, this square represents the broader struggle the region faces: how to grow, to thrive, and to participate in the global economy without destroying the very ecosystems that sustain it. The debate rages in government halls. Should Oceania push for rapid expansion in trade, tourism, and resource development? Or should it take a step back, reassess, and prioritize environmental laws that may slow growth but protect the fragile ecosystems for future generations? The Jupiter-Saturn square brings this conflict into sharp focus, forcing nations to pick a side, or at least find a delicate balance between the two. Educational reforms, especially those aimed at equipping younger generations with the skills needed to manage the impacts of climate change, come under scrutiny. Some leaders advocate for sweeping changes, while others caution against moving too quickly, mindful that infrastructure and resources may not yet be in place to support such ambitious plans. In the background, trade policies come under fire, with nations pushing back against agreements that seem to favor short-term economic gains at the expense of long-term sustainability. The tension between growth and restraint doesn't just remain within national borders. It stretches across the entire region, creating political friction as countries navigate their roles within the global economy. In the end, the square demands a resolution, a way for Oceania to both protect its resources and expand its influence. But how that balance is struck remains to be seen. Mid-November 2024. Saturn-Uranus sextile, innovation meets discipline. As mid-November 2024 unfolds, the skies bring a harmonious yet powerful alignment between Saturn and Uranus. offering the South Pacific Islands a rare opportunity to blend technological innovation with disciplined, long-term strategies. This sextile is more than a fleeting moment, it's a chance for transformation that's not only visionary but also practical, a perfect storm for progress. For Oceania, this alignment couldn't come at a more critical time. The region, where climate change is already a looming reality, is poised to embrace renewable energy sources like solar and wave energy, perfectly suited to the geographical makeup of the islands. Nations such as Fiji and Tonga, traditionally reliant on imported fossil fuels, may now find themselves at the forefront of a green revolution, implementing renewable energy projects that offer not just environmental benefits but economic independence. This innovation is not just about survival, it's about flourishing in a new, sustainable way. In agriculture, where soil erosion and water scarcity threaten food security, the Saturn-Uranus sextile encourages breakthroughs in sustainable farming techniques. Efficient water use, advanced soil management, and even the integration of technology into agriculture could transform the region's approach to food production. These reforms, once the subject of far-off goals, now feel tangible, grounded in the disciplined, long-term strategies that Saturn demands, yet infused with Uranus's spark of ingenuity. The collaboration between nations intensifies. New Zealand and Australia, always regional leaders, could step forward as pioneers of innovation, partnering with smaller Pacific nations to share technology and infrastructure investments. This partnership isn't just symbolic, it's practical, as Saturn ensures that every reform is built to last, fostering resilience against the environmental challenges that threaten to destabilize the region. Jupiter-Uranus sextile, the winds of optimism and opportunity. As if the air weren't already charged with change, the Jupiter-Uranus sextile further elevates the mid-November astrological landscape, ushering in a sense of optimism and boundless potential. This alignment accelerates progress, particularly in areas where science, technology, and finance intersect, offering Oceania a chance to leap forward, embracing innovation at a pace previously unimaginable. In the realm of resource management, this sextile encourages visionary solutions. It's no longer about managing the effects of climate change, it's about redefining the relationship between economy and environment. For the islands, where natural resources are both a gift and a challenge, Jupiter's expansive energy merges with Uranus's revolutionary spirit to propose new ways of balancing economic growth with environmental preservation. The result? A sustainable future, where growth is measured not just in financial terms, but in resilience, sustainability, and long-term well-being. Scientific advances, particularly in climate adaptation and renewable energy, speed up under this sextile's influence. Suddenly, ideas that once seemed out of reach, such as large-scale wave energy farms or genetically modified crops designed to withstand saltwater, are not only possible, but necessary. Healthcare innovations, too, may arise, addressing the region's unique challenges by developing new methods for disease prevention and public health initiatives in remote communities. Jupiter and Uranus also extend their influence into finance, driving restructuring and innovation within Oceania's economies. The islands, which have often relied on external aid, could now find themselves rethinking their financial models, moving towards self-sufficiency. New economic frameworks may prioritize sustainability, offering a future where aid dependency is replaced by partnerships and investments in local industries. The role of global financial institutions, particularly the Asian Development Bank and the United Nations, becomes crucial in funding these groundbreaking initiatives, ensuring that this wave of innovation is not a passing trend but a long-term solution to the region's challenges. November 17-18, 2024, Mercury trine Jupiter, Diplomacy and Educational Renaissance. As Mercury forms a trine with Jupiter, the air hums with the energy of progress, optimism, and collaboration. For Oceania and the South Pacific Islands, this celestial alignment opens doors to diplomatic breakthroughs and educational reforms that resonate far beyond their shores. Mercury, with its swift communication, and Jupiter, with its expansive vision, create the perfect environment for regional leaders to step into global conversations with renewed confidence and purpose. In international forums like the United Nations, nations such as New Zealand and Australia seize the opportunity to champion not just their own interests but the cultural and environmental priorities of their smaller neighbors. Discussions surrounding climate change, trade, and indigenous rights find a more receptive audience, as this trine fosters understanding and mutual respect between nations. There is an increased emphasis on cross-cultural exchange, where Pacific Island nations advocate for their unique perspectives on environmental stewardship, pushing for policies that honor their traditional connection to the land and sea. Education, a critical pillar for the region's future, takes center stage. Mercury's influence brings a focus on media and communication policies that could reshape how the global community views these islands. Indigenous and islander cultures, often marginalized in the global narrative, may now find their voices amplified, gaining a platform to share their stories and wisdom on a larger scale. Remote communities across the Pacific stand to benefit as access to education improves, with the introduction of new programs and technologies designed to bridge the gap between the islands and the wider world. Economically, the Mercury-Jupiter trine encourages the region to push forward on trade agreements, particularly in sectors tied to natural resources, ecotourism, and sustainable fisheries. The Pacific Islands Forum emerges as a leading voice in crafting policies that balance economic growth with environmental preservation, ensuring that trade practices honor both the Earth and the people who depend on it. It is a time of optimism, as the region begins to weave itself more intricately into the fabric of the global economy while safeguarding its rich natural heritage. Saturn-Venus trine, building resilience through stability. As the Mercury-Jupiter trine sets the stage for optimistic growth, the trine between Saturn in Pisces and Venus in Capricorn arrives to ensure that the progress made is built on solid ground. This astrological aspect represents a rare moment of balance between visionary ideals and practical execution, particularly in matters of finance and diplomacy. For Oceania and the South Pacific Islands, this trine signals the creation of lasting economic and diplomatic partnerships. Venus, representing financial resources, aligns with Saturn's disciplined energy, guiding regional leaders toward economic strategies that prioritize long-term stability over short-term gains. Trade agreements with regional powers like Australia and New Zealand are likely to solidify, while partnerships with global institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank take on new significance. Infrastructure development becomes a focal point, with investments directed toward renewable energy, disaster preparedness, and healthcare systems, critical areas where resilience is needed in the face of climate change. This trine emphasizes the importance of socially responsible policies, with a particular focus on supporting vulnerable communities. Rising sea levels and extreme weather events are no longer abstract concerns. They are daily realities that demand thoughtful, strategic action. Saturn's influence ensures that these partnerships are built to last, fostering economic systems that are not only viable but deeply rooted in the needs of the region. The decisions made during this time will have lasting effects, creating a foundation of resilience that supports future generations. Neptune-Sun trine, compassionate leadership and humanitarian reform. As November progresses, the Neptune-Sun trine washes over the region with a wave of compassion and spiritual depth. In Oceania and the South Pacific Islands, where the ocean is both a lifeblood and a threat, this alignment brings a heightened awareness of the interconnectedness of all life. Neptune, ruler of the oceans and collective consciousness, and the Sun, symbol of leadership and vitality, merge to inspire a new wave of humanitarian initiatives and policies that prioritize the common good. For leaders across Oceania, this is a time to lead with heart, to embrace policies that reflect not just the immediate needs of their people but also the moral responsibility they feel toward future generations. Climate-related displacement and health crises are pressing concerns, and this aspect encourages governments to act with compassion, focusing on long-term solutions that care for both the environment and the communities most affected by these challenges. International humanitarian organizations such as the Red Cross and the United Nations are likely to play key roles during this time, offering aid and support to those affected by natural disasters and economic instability. The Neptune-Sun trine invites global cooperation, urging world leaders to recognize the plight of the Pacific Islands and to offer tangible, compassionate assistance. This aspect also inspires a more spiritual approach to governance. Leaders may be drawn to policies that emphasize community, sustainability, and environmental stewardship, aligning with the traditional values of many Pacific Island cultures. The connection to nature, so deeply ingrained in the cultural fabric of these islands, is given renewed focus, as leaders seek to honor their heritage while ensuring the survival of their people. November 22, 2024, Sun and Sagittarius, expanding diplomatic horizons and reforming legal systems. As the Sun blazes into Sagittarius on November 22, 2024, the skies over Oceania and the South Pacific Islands light up with the promise of diplomatic expansion and visionary reform. Sagittarius, ever the explorer and philosopher, encourages these nations to cast their gaze beyond their borders, seeking deeper engagement with the global community. This period is ripe for international cooperation, and regional leaders feel an invigorating push to broaden their influence in forums like the United Nations and the Pacific Islands Forum, where their voices can shape critical global discussions. Diplomatic efforts surge as Oceania's leaders advocate for trade agreements that protect both their economies and their environments. As climate change continues to threaten the delicate balance of life in the Pacific, the Sun in Sagittarius inspires these nations to push for stronger environmental laws, policies that not only resonate with global ideals but address the region's urgent needs. These leaders, emboldened by Sagittarius's far-reaching vision, champion long-term solutions for climate resilience, insisting that international financial support becomes a cornerstone in their efforts to safeguard their islands against rising sea levels and other climate-related impacts. The Sun's influence also shines brightly on education, where reforms aimed at expanding access to learning gain traction. Countries like New Zealand and Australia, already regional powerhouses, may take the lead in fostering educational opportunities for their smaller neighbors. These initiatives are not just about building schools or increasing literacy. They are about empowering Pacific Islanders with the tools and knowledge to drive sustainable development, from mastering marine conservation to advancing renewable energy technologies. The energy of Sagittarius encourages learning that opens minds and fosters a global outlook, preparing the region to meet its challenges with resilience and wisdom. Moon in Leo, a surge of national pride and leadership in the spotlight. While the Sun looks outward, the Moon in Leo focuses inward, igniting a powerful wave of national pride and emotional connection to leadership. This lunar transit amplifies the public's expectations of their leaders, particularly in the island nations of Oceania where traditional values and leadership roles hold deep cultural significance. Under the Moon's fiery Leo influence, citizens become emotionally invested in the visions and actions of those in power, and leaders find themselves in the spotlight, both celebrated and scrutinized. In places like Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga, where respect for traditional leadership runs deep, the Moon in Leo could spark a renewed sense of national identity. Charismatic leaders, those who embody both strength and compassion, rise to prominence, capturing the public's imagination with bold initiatives that promise to uplift their nations. Whether through large-scale climate adaptation projects, economic reforms, or healthcare improvements, these leaders tap into the collective spirit, galvanizing support for national causes that resonate with the heart and soul of their people. Patriotic celebrations, cultural festivals, and nationalistic events take on heightened significance during this transit. The Moon in Leo not only stirs pride but also demands action. It is a time for the people to celebrate their identity and heritage while looking to their leaders to protect and advance their interests on the global stage. The emotional intensity of this moment can unite the public behind causes that reflect their core values, from environmental stewardship to sovereignty. However, the Moon in Leo also brings the weight of public scrutiny. As emotions run high, so do expectations. Leaders who fail to deliver on promises or who appear disconnected from the pressing concerns of their citizens, be it climate change, healthcare, or economic stability, could face swift backlash. The public, feeling a heightened connection to their national identity, will not tolerate mediocrity. Calls for transparency, accountability, and bold leadership grow louder under Leo's influence, making this a pivotal time for those in power to prove their worth. Leo ascendant and Taurus midheaven. Sovereignty in the spotlight, stability at the core. As the Sun enters Sagittarius on November 22, 2024, a powerful Leo ascendant rises on the horizon, placing the themes of self-expression, leadership, and sovereignty front and center for Oceania and the South Pacific Islands. The ascendant in Leo emboldens these nations to assert their independence and showcase their unique cultural identities on the global stage. Leo's regal energy infuses the region with a sense of pride, inspiring leaders to project confidence in international arenas, where they advocate for the self-determination and rights of their people amidst mounting external pressures. This heightened focus on sovereignty may see nations like Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga taking bold stances in international negotiations, whether in trade agreements or climate-related discussions. The Leo ascendant urges them to harness their distinct voices, ensuring they are heard in conversations about environmental protection, humanitarian aid, and the preservation of their cultural heritage. Even smaller nations, often overshadowed by larger powers, may find themselves commanding attention as they advocate for policies that reflect their unique challenges and aspirations. However, while Leo lights the fire of sovereignty, the Taurus midheaven ensures that this fervor is grounded in practicality. Taurus, ever the stabilizing force, directs attention toward the pragmatic realities of resource management and financial stability. For economies dependent on agriculture, fishing, and tourism, the Taurus midheaven emphasizes the importance of sustainable practices that secure both economic growth and environmental preservation. Leaders may be drawn to long-term planning, prioritizing investments in infrastructure designed to withstand the environmental challenges of rising sea levels and increased natural disasters. Organizations like the Pacific Islands Forum and the South Pacific Regional Environment Program, SPREP, are likely to take center stage, facilitating critical discussions on how to manage the region's resources more sustainably. These conversations are not only about survival but about securing the financial stability of smaller island nations, particularly in the face of global economic shifts. Under Taurus's influence, the focus remains on building something that lasts, on creating systems that will protect both the environment and the people for generations to come. November 22, 2024, Saturn-Mercury trine, structured diplomacy and strategic communication. As the Sun's ingress into Sagittarius sets the stage for expansive diplomacy, the Saturn-Mercury trine from November 22, 2024, adds a layer of disciplined, structured communication to the cosmic equation. Saturn, the planet of responsibility and long-term planning, forms a harmonious connection with Mercury, the ruler of communication and intellect. Together, they create an atmosphere where words carry weight, and negotiations are infused with a sense of seriousness and purpose. For Oceania and the South Pacific Islands, this trine is a golden opportunity to engage in diplomatic talks that are precise, well-considered, and forward-looking. Saturn in Pisces, ruling water-related matters, places the region's environmental concerns at the forefront. Rising sea levels, marine biodiversity, and climate resilience are all critical topics. The Pacific Islands, which are on the front lines of climate change, may use this alignment to push for concrete, long-term solutions in international forums. The practical energy of Mercury ensures that these discussions are not merely theoretical but grounded in actionable strategies. This is also an ideal period for crafting and solidifying international agreements related to climate finance, aid distribution, and resource management. Governments in the region are likely to focus on securing legal frameworks that protect their interests, particularly as larger nations debate policies that could shape Oceania's future. The Saturn-Mercury trine fosters an atmosphere of precision and care, making it a favorable time for signing treaties or agreements that have been in negotiation for months. For organizations like SPREP and the Pacific Islands Forum, this transit offers a window to create policies that ensure sustainable development and climate resilience for the long term. These policies will likely focus on practical solutions to water-related issues, such as ocean health and the protection of coastal communities from rising sea levels. Mercury's influence during this period guarantees that these policies are communicated clearly and effectively, not only within the region but to the global community as well. All of November 2024, end of the month and long-term impacts. As November draws to a close, the cosmic landscape shifts into a period of profound transformation for Oceania and the South Pacific Islands. The Uranus-Pluto trine and Neptune-Pluto sextile drive deep changes in global systems, extending their influence into finance, governance, and humanitarian efforts across the region. The weight of these planetary alignments signals a time of systemic reform, urging these nations to rethink their strategies in light of both immediate needs and long-term survival. Uranus-Pluto trine, revolutionizing agriculture and finance. The Uranus-Pluto trine, a potent combination of revolutionary energy and deep transformation, sweeps through the financial and agricultural sectors. For Oceania, this alignment is an invitation to embrace innovative solutions that address pressing agricultural challenges, such as the impact of climate change on food security. The introduction of more sustainable farming practices, alongside cutting-edge technologies like vertical farming or drought-resistant crops, could become pivotal strategies in rethinking how these nations feed their populations. On a broader economic scale, the Uranus-Pluto trine pushes for radical reforms that allow for a more sustainable financial model. Oceania's economies, often reliant on traditional exports like tourism and fisheries, are encouraged to diversify, embracing technologies that promote long-term stability. Uranus in Taurus, with its eye on sustainability, aligns perfectly with these goals, supporting investments in renewable energy and environmental projects that promise lasting resilience. This trine marks a turning point, allowing Oceania to not just survive but thrive amidst shifting global dynamics. By rethinking their economic structures, these nations can position themselves as leaders in sustainability, pioneering new models that other regions may soon follow. Neptune-Pluto sextile, humanitarian and environmental awakening. While Uranus drives economic and technological innovation, the Neptune-Pluto sextile brings a wave of spiritual and humanitarian transformation. Neptune's retrograde motion in Pisces, ruler of the oceans, brings to the surface environmental degradation and institutional failures that may have been overlooked in the past. For the island nations of Oceania, whose very existence is intertwined with the health of the ocean, this sextile illuminates the urgent need for reform in environmental policies and humanitarian efforts. This period may reveal previously hidden weaknesses in how governments and international organizations have managed climate change-related challenges, prompting a global call for stronger action. International bodies, inspired by Neptune's humanitarian influence, may rally around Oceania, spearheading initiatives that prioritize the protection of marine ecosystems and the displacement of populations due to rising sea levels. For these nations, the Neptune-Pluto sextile is a moment to seek global solidarity, as they find themselves at the heart of a growing international movement to safeguard the planet's future. Jupiter retrograde in Gemini, reassessing diplomacy and education. Jupiter's retrograde motion in Gemini during late November introduces a period of reflection, particularly around communication and diplomacy. For Oceania, this transit encourages a re-evaluation of how these island nations engage with the global community. As they reflect on previous diplomatic strategies, there is an opportunity to refine their messaging and strengthen alliances that better represent their interests on the world stage. In addition, Jupiter retrograde in Gemini may also prompt a deeper conversation within the region about education. This could lead to renewed emphasis on climate science, technological innovation, and sustainable practices in school curricula. Educational reforms that enhance access to knowledge in areas such as renewable energy and marine conservation will ensure that future generations of Pacific Islanders are equipped to lead the charge in confronting the unique challenges their nations face. Uranus retrograde in Taurus. Disruptions and innovation. The influence of Uranus retrograde in Taurus continues to shake up the financial and agricultural systems, compelling Oceania to confront economic disruptions head-on. This period may bring unexpected challenges, such as volatile export markets or increasingly unpredictable weather patterns affecting agriculture and fisheries. However, Uranus retrograde, though disruptive, also sparks innovation. These challenges may serve as a catalyst for Oceania to adopt new technologies and economic strategies that align with the evolving global landscape. In particular, the focus on financial restructuring could lead to groundbreaking approaches to trade and investment. The traditional models of economic support may no longer suffice, and the region may begin to explore more self-sufficient and sustainable economic frameworks. As governments and organizations navigate this disruption, they are likely to prioritize long-term stability over short-term gains, ensuring that the future of their economies is both resilient and adaptable. Pluto's final degrees in Capricorn. The dawn of a new era. As Pluto moves through its final degrees in Capricorn, the transformation of global power dynamics and economic systems reaches a critical point. For Oceania and the South Pacific Islands, this marks the beginning of a profound shift. The old structures that have governed international relations and economic policies for decades are crumbling, and in their place, new paradigms are emerging. This transition represents a pivotal moment for the region, as Oceania stands on the brink of a new era characterized by collective innovation, social progress, and redefined global order. Pluto's final push through Capricorn is a signal for the region to step into its power, embracing the changes that will redefine its role on the global stage in the years to come. Conclusion: navigating a transformative landscape. The end of November 2024 is not just a conclusion but a beginning. The Uranus-Pluto trine and Neptune-Pluto sextile drive revolutionary changes in agriculture, finance, and environmental policy, reshaping the future of Oceania and the South Pacific Islands. The Jupiter retrograde in Gemini encourages reflection on diplomacy and education, prompting these nations to refine their strategies and equip their citizens for the challenges ahead. Meanwhile, Uranus retrograde in Taurus offers disruption, but with it, the opportunity for innovation and economic reinvention. As Pluto completes its journey through Capricorn, these island nations are poised to enter a new era of collective strength, innovation, and sustainability. Organizations like the Pacific Islands Forum and SPREP will play critical roles in guiding these nations into the future, where the emphasis on sustainability, humanitarian progress, and climate resilience will be the cornerstone of their prosperity. The astrological influences of this period ensure that while the path ahead may be challenging, it is also filled with opportunities for growth, adaptation, and lasting change. November 2024, the Middle East in motion, a cosmic reckoning. The astrological events of November 2024 cast a vivid and profound light on the intricate political, economic, and social tapestry of the Middle East. The region, home to historic cities and sweeping deserts, is no stranger to change, but this month, the stars hint at transformations that go beyond the visible. The movements of celestial bodies beckon power shifts and behind-the-scenes negotiations, setting the stage for profound reformation in Israel, Gaza, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. With the Israel-Gaza conflict at the center of these tensions, the stars push each nation toward its own destiny, blending human ambition with cosmic timing. November 1, 2024, the Scorpio new moon in Saturn's steady hand. On November 1, the Sun and new moon align in the enigmatic sign of Scorpio, creating a powerful trine to Saturn in Pisces and a sextile to Mercury. Like a master strategist, Scorpio thrives on secrecy, control, and transformation. In this energy, the Middle East finds itself in the crucible, especially in Israel and Gaza, where unseen forces work tirelessly to redefine the parameters of conflict. This cosmic alignment speaks not only of battles fought on the ground but of deeper, hidden negotiations brokered by global powers, meetings behind closed doors where peace treaties are redrawn, ceasefires are reimagined, and alliances shift. The heavy hand of Saturn, tempered by the waters of Pisces, reinforces the weight of history and responsibility. Regional organizations such as the Arab League and international players like the United Nations gather under Scorpio's dark, transformative skies to strategize long-term solutions. The focus moves beyond immediate military actions to something deeper, restructuring peace talks, stabilizing fragile economies, and perhaps, in the shadowy corners, considering the longevity of vital resources like oil and water. These hidden treasures, so critical to Middle Eastern survival, demand attention, and the world begins to see how intertwined they are with the region's future. For Iran and Yemen, nations perched on seismic fault lines, Saturn's presence may signal something even more ominous. Natural disasters, perhaps a sudden earthquake or flood, could tear through cities, offering grim reminders that Mother Earth herself plays a role in reshaping the fates of nations. Yet these calamities could also serve as unlikely catalysts for unity, prompting humanitarian efforts that transcend political feuds and divert attention, if only momentarily, from the region's never-ending tensions. November 3, 2024. Mercury ventures into Sagittarius, a bold call to dialogue. As Mercury strides into the expansive realm of Sagittarius, a new energy infuses the Middle East. This is a time when diplomacy reigns supreme, and global conversations gain momentum. For Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria, this transit sparks fresh attempts at peace, where broader, more inclusive dialogue replaces narrow, defensive rhetoric. The Israel-Gaza conflict, a festering wound on the global conscience, may finally see a surge of international mediators entering the fray. Under Mercury's Sagittarian influence, they will not seek merely to settle disputes but to expand the conversation, considering the broader implications of peace for the entire region. Mercury in Sagittarius does not stop at borders. Its influence extends into the legal halls of Iran and Lebanon, where ongoing internal tensions may prompt leaders to reconsider outdated laws. Human rights, trade agreements, and economic reforms become hot topics, pushing governments to adopt new perspectives. Yet, with Sagittarius comes the risk of overpromising. Bold leaders may make grand statements, declaring sweeping reforms or negotiating trade deals that seem too good to be true. For Iran, this is a moment of potential optimism, where attempts to revitalize international relations, perhaps by leveraging educational or technological exchanges, could soften the blows of sanctions. But will the enthusiasm for change be enough to overcome the entrenched obstacles? Time will tell. From conflict to transformation, a global shift. In the midst of these celestial shifts, the Middle East stands at a crossroads. The planets, with their intricate dance, signal the possibility of transformation, both seen and unseen. Whether it's behind-the-scenes negotiations over oil fields or the sudden humanitarian call to aid a disaster-stricken nation, the region vibrates with urgency. And yet, amid all the strategizing, restructuring, and promises, one thing remains clear: the Middle East is not only reacting to global forces, it is actively shaping its own future. November 5, 2024. Mars roars into Leo, power struggles unleashed. As Mars enters Leo on November 5, the Middle East finds itself gripped by a surge of assertive, bold leadership. Mars, the planet of war and action, magnifies Leo's thirst for recognition and dominance, igniting political leaders across the region. Like a lion in its domain, leaders will seek to assert control, and this newfound audacity could result in confrontational stances, particularly in conflict zones. The Israel-Gaza conflict, already fraught with tension, may experience a fresh wave of military maneuvers or diplomatic brinkmanship as nations scramble to demonstrate strength. Israel and Iran, in particular, could posture more aggressively, leading to potential escalations that ripple through the region. But this cosmic influence doesn't stop at international disputes. Internally, power struggles within governments and political factions in Syria, Yemen, and Lebanon may intensify. Mars in Leo thrives on competition, and leaders will vie for dominance, creating both external and internal battles. In Yemen, Saudi Arabia may further entrench its involvement, seeking to solidify its position as a regional powerhouse while facing growing opposition. The bold energy of Mars fuels ambitions, but it can also spark public outrage. Watch for protests and demonstrations in Iran and Lebanon, where dissatisfaction with leadership has been brewing. The people, emboldened by Mars' fiery influence, may rise against systems they view as oppressive or ineffective. November 12, 2024. Venus in Capricorn, pragmatism prevails. With Venus stepping into Capricorn on November 12, a shift in the region's energy becomes palpable. Where Mars in Leo demanded force and recognition, Venus in Capricorn promotes stability and practicality. Financial negotiations, diplomatic efforts, and long-term peace initiatives rise to the forefront as the Middle East begins to focus on rebuilding and restructuring. Venus, the planet of relationships and values, under Capricorn's disciplined guidance, is less concerned with fleeting wins and more intent on establishing enduring solutions. In the aftermath of destruction, countries like Gaza, Syria, and Yemen face the daunting task of rebuilding. Here, Venus in Capricorn provides the blueprint. Economic discussions will prioritize infrastructure, not just in the physical sense, but in terms of rebuilding the foundations of society itself. International organizations like the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, and the United Nations may step forward to facilitate these efforts, with long-term financial stability as the guiding star. The World Bank, perhaps, could offer comprehensive aid packages, addressing not just immediate needs but laying the groundwork for sustained recovery. In Israel and Palestine, this transit marks a turning point, albeit a cautious one. Venus in Capricorn emphasizes diplomatic progress that is slow but steady, focusing on long-term peace building rather than quick fixes. Financial talks between Israel and neighboring Arab nations may also shift toward practical, structured arrangements that benefit all parties over time. The broader impact, economic resilience and social movements. For nations like Lebanon and Iran, where economic collapse and civil unrest have gripped the populace, Venus in Capricorn encourages leaders to look beyond short-term appeasements. Instead, the focus will shift toward durable solutions, investments in technology, renewable energy, and other sectors capable of transforming these economies. Lebanon's crumbling infrastructure and Iran's struggles with sanctions highlight the urgency for a new economic direction. This is a time for pragmatic leadership, where decisions made now will ripple into the future. As governments push forward with financial reforms, social movements may echo these shifts in power and stability. People in the streets of Tehran and Beirut, having borne the brunt of economic hardship, will demand accountability. Venus in Capricorn offers the potential for governments to rebuild trust, but it requires genuine commitment to long-term progress, something that both the IMF and regional alliances like the Arab League may strongly encourage. November 2024, a cosmic dance of conflict and cooperation. The astrological aspects of November 2024 create a powerful narrative in the Middle East, where fiery ambitions meet cold, pragmatic realities. Mars in Leo pushes leaders to assert their dominance, sometimes through confrontational means, while Venus in Capricorn tempers these impulses with a desire for structure and sustainability. The region's political landscape, already complex, will become even more layered as internal and external forces converge. Global organizations like the United Nations and the IMF will play pivotal roles, their strategies and interventions shaping the future of war-torn regions. The World Bank's involvement in economic rebuilding efforts for countries like Gaza and Yemen could lay the foundation for a more resilient Middle East, while the Arab League and GCC work to maintain diplomatic channels between feuding nations. November 15, 2024, Saturn direct in Pisces, compassion meets responsibility. As Saturn stations direct in the compassionate waters of Pisces, the Middle East feels a palpable shift. For months, Saturn's retrograde may have stalled essential reforms in healthcare, humanitarian aid, and social welfare. Now, as Saturn moves forward, there is renewed momentum, especially in crisis-stricken regions like Syria, Yemen, and Gaza. The pressing need to address the devastation of war, poverty, and displacement reaches a turning point. International organizations, like the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, World Health Organization, WHO, and non-governmental organizations, are poised to intensify their efforts, aiming to alleviate the suffering of millions. For Gaza, where the scars of conflict run deep, Saturn's direct motion symbolizes a long-awaited breath of relief. Global actors, perhaps led by the Red Cross and the United Nations, will seek to implement healthcare reforms and humanitarian aid strategies that had been postponed during Saturn's retrograde. The need for sustainable healthcare systems and mental health support for civilians becomes more apparent, pushing leaders to adopt not only practical solutions but also deeply compassionate approaches. The astrological symbolism of Pisces lends emotional weight to these actions, as the world looks to soften its heart and truly care for the most vulnerable populations. Full moon in Taurus, the light of resources and economic stability. Under the steady glow of the full moon in Taurus, the Middle East turns its gaze toward resources, material wealth, food security, and the preservation of natural resources such as water and oil. For nations like Iran and Iraq, whose economies are intricately tied to oil, this lunar spotlight casts a revealing light on economic strategies. Financial systems, previously operating in the shadows of larger political agendas, are now front and center. Resource-dependent economies must re-examine how they manage wealth and ensure their long-term sustainability. In Israel and Gaza, discussions may emerge around the equitable access to vital resources, such as water rights and energy, which often lie at the heart of regional tensions. The full moon in Taurus invites leaders to seek more balanced, grounded solutions. This is not just about managing resources but also addressing the deeper economic inequalities that exacerbate conflict. Nations like Saudi Arabia and Iran, long dependent on their oil reserves, may face economic volatility, as this lunar phase illuminates mismanagement and urges re-evaluation. The challenge is clear. The full moon calls for countries to stabilize their economies while conserving resources for future generations. Jupiter-Saturn square, tension between growth and caution. On November 15, the square between expansive Jupiter in Gemini and cautious Saturn in Pisces intensifies the complexity of the region's political and economic landscape. Jupiter, retrograding through Gemini, encourages rapid growth, especially in sectors like education, media, and international diplomacy. However, Saturn in Pisces pulls the reins, reminding leaders that expansion without responsibility can lead to disaster. This cosmic tension manifests clearly in countries navigating both modernization and humanitarian crises. In Israel and Gaza, the contrast is stark. While Jupiter in Gemini promotes diplomatic talks, media engagement, and broader international dialogue, Saturn reminds stakeholders that humanitarian needs cannot be sidelined. The push for growth, whether through media reform or education, clashes with the dire need for managing resources and ensuring aid reaches those in need. Miscommunication between global powers, perhaps due to Jupiter's retrograde, adds to the tension, potentially delaying peace efforts and recovery programs. For Middle Eastern nations, particularly those facing internal pressures like Iran and Lebanon, this square represents a dilemma: how to embrace technological and educational advances while staying grounded in the real challenges of resource management and humanitarian responsibility. The expansive energy of Jupiter may tempt leaders to make promises they can't keep, while Saturn insists that every step forward be built on a solid foundation. Mid-November 2024, Saturn-Uranus sextile, innovation meets discipline. As the Saturn-Uranus sextile takes center stage in mid-November, the Middle East finds itself at a pivotal moment where innovation and tradition blend harmoniously. This cosmic alignment fosters a powerful environment for productive reform, encouraging nations across the region to break free from outdated structures while grounding their advances in practical frameworks. For countries like Israel, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, this is a time to embrace the future without losing sight of the lessons from the past. In Israel, where the technology sector is already a global leader, the sextile supercharges innovation. Expect advancements in sustainable agriculture, which is vital to Israel's long-term stability in an increasingly arid climate. Energy initiatives, particularly in renewable resources like solar power, could also gain traction as the country strives to balance economic growth with environmental preservation. The push for technological breakthroughs isn't just about maintaining geopolitical power. It's about securing a sustainable future in a region where resources are scarce. Iran, under the weight of economic sanctions, may look to this cosmic alignment as an opportunity for financial restructuring. Uranus's revolutionary spirit sparks a drive for technological advancements, which could help Iran navigate around the economic restrictions that have crippled its economy. The adoption of innovative financial technologies or blockchain systems might allow Iran to bypass some of the sanctions, while Saturn ensures that these innovations are implemented with caution and discipline, avoiding rash decisions that could backfire. Meanwhile, war-torn nations like Yemen and Syria may begin to glimpse a path forward. The Saturn-Uranus sextile brings hope for rebuilding efforts, particularly through international partnerships. These countries might start exploring new technologies for reconstructing infrastructure, perhaps even pioneering methods of sustainable rebuilding that could serve as models for other conflict-ridden regions. In a world eager for progress, the influence of Uranus promises that even the most war-ravaged nations can find ways to innovate and thrive, while Saturn keeps the focus on realistic, long-term planning. Jupiter-Uranus sextile, expansive breakthroughs and disruptive diplomacy. As if the innovations of the Saturn-Uranus sextile weren't enough, the Jupiter-Uranus sextile intensifies the pace of change in the Middle East. Jupiter, planet of expansion, combines its energy with Uranus's disruptive force to create a surge of technological advancements, financial restructuring, and social reforms. For countries heavily dependent on natural resources, like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, this is a critical period to rethink their financial systems and pivot toward sustainability. International collaborations are likely to flourish, particularly in sectors such as renewable energy and climate change. Saudi Arabia, always keen to position itself as a leader in the region, may seize this opportunity to advance its Vision 2030 plan. The sextile accelerates progress in renewable energy, with investments in solar and wind power likely to see a boost. The country could become a hub for international energy collaborations, working closely with countries like Israel and the UAE, who are also eager to transition to more sustainable economies. For the Israel-Gaza conflict, the Jupiter-Uranus sextile holds the potential for unexpected diplomatic breakthroughs. Uranus, with its disruptive tendencies, opens the door to unconventional solutions. Could a renewable energy deal between Israel and its neighbors serve as a bridge toward peace? Perhaps. This sextile may inspire previously unthinkable forms of cooperation, as nations recognize that shared resources, like energy, can be a foundation for stability. Digital diplomacy, facilitated through new technologies, could also play a pivotal role, offering innovative ways to mediate and resolve conflicts. The healthcare sector, too, will feel the effects of this expansive energy. Iran, facing healthcare challenges due to international sanctions, might see unexpected advancements in medical research. New technologies could allow the country to sidestep some of the limitations imposed by sanctions, bringing much-needed healthcare solutions to its people. The Jupiter-Uranus sextile promises that even under duress, breakthroughs are possible. Global organizations, navigating the waves of change. Throughout these dynamic transits, global organizations will be key players in guiding the Middle East through this transformative period. The United Nations, the Arab League, and the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, are likely to lead discussions on economic stability, humanitarian aid, and conflict resolution. As nations embrace technological advances and financial restructuring, these organizations will act as mediators and facilitators, ensuring that progress is inclusive and sustainable. In Syria and Yemen, where rebuilding efforts are critical, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, may step in with financial assistance and restructuring plans. These institutions will be crucial in providing the resources needed to rebuild war-torn infrastructure and stabilize fragile economies. Their involvement could also help ensure that the technological innovations sparked by Uranus are grounded in real-world practicality, as Saturn insists. November 17–18, 2024, Mercury trine Jupiter, diplomacy in motion. As Mercury and Jupiter form a harmonious trine on November 17–18, 2024, the Middle East stands poised for breakthroughs in communication and diplomacy. This aspect encourages optimism and the free flow of ideas, making it a key moment for peace talks and cross-cultural dialogue, particularly in the fraught landscape of the Israel-Gaza conflict. International mediators, likely led by the United Nations and the Arab League, could seize this window to push forward renewed efforts for negotiation and resolution. In Israel and Gaza, the Mercury-Jupiter trine symbolizes the possibility of establishing new channels of dialogue. Third-party mediation may play a pivotal role, helping both sides articulate their positions more effectively and paving the way for meaningful compromises. Global media outlets, often focused on the violence and unrest in the region, may shift their narrative toward a more hopeful and forward-looking tone. This aspect fosters transparency and promotes an atmosphere where peace can be discussed openly and with genuine intent. Across the broader Middle East, this trine is likely to spark advancements in education and media. In nations like Iran and Lebanon, where internal strife has held back progress, educational reforms may take center stage, with institutions seeking international partnerships to modernize curricula and promote global cooperation. Jupiter's expansive energy will amplify these efforts, offering a platform for countries to showcase their commitment to progress and reform. Media, too, will feel the effects of this alignment. The dissemination of information becomes more transparent and inclusive, helping to break down long-standing cultural barriers. New media laws may be introduced to enhance press freedoms, encouraging the spread of balanced narratives that promote understanding rather than division. Saturn-Venus trine, building bridges through stability. On the same days, the trine between Saturn and Venus provides a foundation for stability in both financial and diplomatic matters. Saturn, the planet of discipline and structure, harmonizes with Venus, which governs relationships and economic systems, creating an atmosphere conducive to long-term agreements and sustainable partnerships. For Middle Eastern nations like Israel and the UAE, which have invested heavily in high-tech sectors and financial reforms, this is a moment of validation, when their careful planning begins to bear fruit. For the Israel-Gaza conflict, this trine may mark a turning point in economic diplomacy. International aid packages aimed at rebuilding Gaza could emerge, driven by a shared understanding that peace requires long-term economic investment. This is not the time for quick fixes, but rather for measured, thoughtful strategies that prioritize the region's long-term stability. Countries across the Middle East might forge new alliances or strengthen existing ones, seeking to stabilize the region through shared economic growth. In economically unstable countries like Iran and Lebanon, the Saturn-Venus trine offers a chance for financial restructuring. International organizations such as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank may step in with comprehensive economic reforms, focusing on infrastructure development and poverty alleviation. These partnerships will aim to create resilience in financial systems that have been tested by sanctions and internal turmoil, offering a pathway toward sustainable growth. Neptune-Sun trine, a wave of compassion and idealism. As Neptune and the Sun align in a compassionate trine, the Middle East experiences a rare moment of spiritual leadership and humanitarian focus. Neptune, the planet of dreams, spirituality, and idealism, blends harmoniously with the Sun's focus on leadership, urging governments and global figures to prioritize collective well-being over individual or national interests. This transit brings a powerful wave of compassion, potentially inspiring reforms in healthcare, social services, and humanitarian aid, especially in war-torn regions like Syria, Yemen, and Gaza. In the context of the Israel-Gaza conflict, the Neptune-Sun trine suggests the emergence of leaders who prioritize peacebuilding over power. Spiritual leaders, community organizers, and global diplomats may rise to prominence, advocating for reconciliation and healing. Their voices, driven by a deep sense of empathy, could inspire both regional and global powers to approach the conflict with a renewed sense of compassion. Countries like Lebanon and Syria, grappling with the aftermath of civil war and economic collapse, could see a surge in grassroots movements focused on humanitarian aid and social reform. Civil society organizations, often sidelined in favor of more powerful players, may gain momentum, using this aspect to rally for increased support for the most vulnerable. This period is ripe for international humanitarian organizations, such as Médecins Sans Frontières and the Red Crescent, to amplify their efforts, drawing attention to the humanitarian crises still unfolding in these regions. Organizations and global influence, guiding the Middle East's path forward. Throughout mid-November 2024, global organizations will continue to play a pivotal role in shaping the trajectory of the Middle East. The United Nations, the Arab League, and key non-governmental organizations will remain instrumental in fostering dialogue, providing humanitarian aid, and supporting economic recovery. In particular, international financial bodies such as the IMF and the World Bank may provide critical guidance to nations seeking to rebuild, offering both resources and strategic advice on long-term infrastructure development. Countries like Yemen and Syria, still fragile from years of conflict, will benefit from these global partnerships as they work to stabilize their economies and rebuild their war-torn infrastructures. The work of humanitarian organizations, already deeply entrenched in these nations, may expand, reaching new heights under the compassionate influence of Neptune. Mid-November 2024, a confluence of compassion and strategy. The celestial transits of mid-November 2024 offer a rare and potent combination of diplomacy, compassion, and long-term strategy. The harmonious aspects between Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, Neptune, and the Sun all work together to create an environment ripe for progress. While the Israel-Gaza conflict continues to be a focal point, the broader Middle East is also poised for meaningful change. Through diplomatic breakthroughs, economic reforms, and humanitarian efforts, the region has the potential to move toward a future grounded in stability and cooperation. Yet, as the planets remind us, true progress requires both vision and discipline, a balance between the ideal and the practical. The Middle East's journey through these celestial events will not be without its challenges, but the opportunities for transformation are undeniable, offering a glimmer of hope for a region long in need of healing. November 22, 2024, Sun and Sagittarius, a quest for global diplomacy and legal reforms. As the Sun strides into Sagittarius, a new wave of optimism and intellectual pursuit sweeps across the Middle East. The energy of Sagittarius, driven by expansion and philosophical inquiry, nudges countries toward forging new alliances, revisiting old disputes, and renewing efforts for diplomatic resolutions. The Israel-Gaza conflict, an enduring focal point of regional tension, may see fresh momentum in peace talks. The Sun in Sagittarius fosters a hopeful atmosphere, where international bodies such as the United Nations and the Arab League play pivotal roles in mediating discussions. These talks may focus on long-term solutions rather than temporary ceasefires, with an emphasis on humanitarian relief and rebuilding efforts in Gaza. The influence of Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter, the planet of law and justice, suggests that legal reforms could take center stage during this period. Discussions around human rights and international law, particularly concerning war-torn regions like Gaza and Syria, may become more prominent. Global leaders are likely to emphasize fairness, justice, and the protection of civilians, calling for accountability and adherence to international standards. In countries like Lebanon and Iran, this transit could also inspire a push for educational reforms, as these nations seek to strengthen academic ties and enhance international cooperation. Sagittarius thrives on intellectual expansion, making this a favorable time for countries to invest in education as a tool for long-term stability. On a broader scale, the Sun in Sagittarius encourages dialogue on global trade and resource management, issues that are critical to the Middle East. The region's oil and water resources are often at the heart of geopolitical tensions, but this transit may inspire new trade agreements or revisions to existing ones. Aligning economic policies with global sustainability goals could become a priority, as nations recognize the importance of managing their natural resources responsibly in an increasingly interconnected world. Moon in Leo, a surge of national pride and leadership. Simultaneously, the Moon enters Leo, intensifying the emotional landscape across the Middle East. Leo's fiery energy, ruled by the Sun, places leadership and public figures under the spotlight, amplifying the emotional connection between citizens and their governments. In Israel, Gaza, Iran, and Lebanon, leaders will find themselves scrutinized more closely than ever, as the public rallies behind those who can embody strength, pride, and resilience. Charisma becomes an essential trait for leadership during this transit, and those who can inspire confidence and hope may find themselves at the center of national movements. For the Israel-Gaza conflict, the Moon in Leo heightens nationalistic fervor. Leaders on both sides may use this time to deliver stirring speeches and appeals to national pride, rallying their citizens with powerful declarations of intent. Public emotions will run high, as the Moon in Leo encourages people to vocalize their hopes, fears, and demands. This emotional surge could also lead to increased support for peace efforts, as citizens push their leaders to take bold, decisive steps toward resolution. However, it may also spark heated debates and even protests, as different factions within these societies press for their vision of the future. In Lebanon, where political instability has long plagued the nation, the Moon in Leo could ignite a wave of public demonstrations. Citizens, already frustrated by economic hardship and governance failures, may take to the streets, demanding reform and accountability from their leaders. The energy of Leo inspires bold action, and this could lead to large-scale political rallies or movements calling for change. The public's emotional investment in their leadership will be at its peak, and leaders who fail to rise to the occasion may face significant backlash. A dual influence, expansion and emotion. The combination of the Sun in Sagittarius and the Moon in Leo creates a potent mix of intellectual expansion and emotional intensity. The Sun's influence drives the region toward seeking broader diplomatic solutions, legal reforms, and international cooperation, while the Moon stirs the hearts of the people, making leadership a critical element in navigating these turbulent times. Leaders who can harness the hopeful, expansive energy of Sagittarius while also appealing to the emotional and nationalistic pride fueled by the Moon in Leo may find themselves in a position to lead their nations toward meaningful change. For the Middle East, this period represents a crucial moment of both reflection and action. The Sun in Sagittarius beckons countries to think beyond immediate concerns and look toward the future, while the Moon in Leo demands that leaders earn the trust and loyalty of their people through decisive, compassionate leadership. Whether through diplomatic breakthroughs, legal reforms, or public movements, the stars suggest that the region stands on the cusp of significant transformation, one that will require both visionary thinking and emotional intelligence. November 22, 2024, Leo rising, a bold stance in global leadership. As the Sun ingresses into Sagittarius with Leo rising on the horizon, the importance of leadership, sovereignty, and national pride takes center stage across the Middle East. Leo rising channels the energy of strength, self-expression, and bold declarations, which are likely to influence how nations present themselves on the global stage. For countries like Iran and Syria, this could be a time of assertive displays of independence, especially in response to international pressure or sanctions. Expect statements of sovereignty and resistance against perceived external interference, as these nations seek to affirm their autonomy and showcase their resilience in the face of global challenges. Israel, too, may lean into the Leo rising energy by reinforcing its focus on national security and defense policies. This period is likely to see a renewed emphasis on projecting strength and determination, with the government showcasing its military capabilities and highlighting its efforts to safeguard the nation's sovereignty. Leo's influence encourages bold, charismatic leadership, and Israel's political figures may use this time to appeal to national pride, stirring a sense of unity and purpose among the public. However, the energy of Leo rising is not purely focused on defiance. It also encourages self-expression and the pursuit of grand visions, which could lead to creative diplomatic efforts aimed at resolving long-standing conflicts in the region. Leaders may feel emboldened to take more assertive positions in peace negotiations, particularly in the Israel-Gaza conflict, where the desire for sovereignty and security is deeply intertwined with the humanitarian need for stability and peace. Taurus midheaven, the quest for financial stability and sustainability. While Leo rising brings emotional intensity and national pride to the forefront, the Taurus midheaven grounds these ambitions in the practical need for financial stability and sustainable resource management. Taurus, ruled by Venus, emphasizes material wealth, security, and long-term planning. For the Middle East, this means a heightened focus on ensuring that economic policies are aligned with sustainable growth, particularly as the global market increasingly shifts toward renewable energy and sustainability. For oil-rich nations like Iran and Saudi Arabia, this Taurus influence encourages a recalibration of economic strategies. These countries may begin to prioritize long-term financial stability over short-term gains, recognizing that their continued prosperity depends on how they manage their natural resources. With global discussions about the transition to sustainable energy sources gaining momentum, nations heavily reliant on oil exports must now balance their economic interests with the need for diversification and sustainability. Taurus midheaven also underscores the importance of practical resource management in conflict zones like Gaza and Syria. Rebuilding efforts in these regions may receive renewed attention, with international organizations such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, stepping in to provide financial aid and infrastructure development. The focus here is on ensuring that these rebuilding efforts are sustainable, creating economic systems that can withstand future challenges and provide stability for the population. Global influence, balancing diplomacy and material concerns. During this period, global organizations will play a pivotal role in shaping both the political and economic trajectory of the Middle East. The Sun in Sagittarius encourages expansive diplomacy and international cooperation, while the Taurus midheaven ensures that practical concerns, particularly financial stability and resource management, remain at the forefront of these discussions. Organizations like the United Nations, the Arab League, and the IMF will likely take the lead in facilitating diplomatic talks and economic recovery efforts, ensuring that the region is equipped to face both immediate challenges and long-term demands. The combination of Leo rising and the Taurus midheaven presents a unique balance. On the one hand, there is the fervor of national pride and the desire for strong leadership. On the other, there is a pragmatic need to ensure that nations are economically secure and capable of managing their resources in a sustainable way. Leaders who can navigate both the emotional and material needs of their countries will find themselves well positioned to guide their nations through this transformative period. A cosmic call to action. Leo's charisma meets Taurus steadfastness. As the Middle East enters this phase of leadership and resource management, the stars call for bold, visionary leadership tempered by a strong sense of responsibility. The energy of Leo rising demands that leaders step into the spotlight with confidence, while the Taurus midheaven reminds them that success must be built on solid, sustainable foundations. For countries like Israel, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, this is a time to assert their place on the global stage, whether through declarations of sovereignty, military displays, or diplomatic efforts. Yet beneath the surface, there is a quieter but equally urgent need to focus on the economic and material realities that underpin national power. Nations that can balance their desire for independence with the practical need for sustainability will be the ones that thrive as this astrological period unfolds. For Gaza and Syria, the focus may turn to rebuilding and securing long-term financial aid from international organizations. The Taurus midheaven's grounding energy will push these nations toward creating infrastructure and economic systems that can provide stability for future generations, while Leo rising emphasizes the need for leadership that can inspire and unify their people. November 22, 2024, Saturn-Mercury trine, disciplined diplomacy and structured communication. The Saturn-Mercury trine from November 22, 25 brings a welcome period of clarity and focused, disciplined communication to the Middle East. Saturn in Pisces, representing structure and long-term planning, combines harmoniously with Mercury in Sagittarius, which is driven by intellectual exploration and expansion. This trine provides the perfect atmosphere for serious negotiations, particularly those involving complex, long-standing conflicts such as the Israel-Gaza situation. The grounding influence of Saturn ensures that the discussions during this time will be practical and solution-oriented, with a focus on long-term stability rather than short-term gains. In the context of the Israel-Gaza conflict, this aspect is likely to enhance the efficacy of peace talks. Mediators from international organizations like the United Nations and the European Union could take center stage, guiding both sides toward structured agreements, perhaps focusing on durable ceasefires or humanitarian initiatives. The disciplined nature of Saturn will push leaders to consider the long-term implications of their decisions, ensuring that any agreements reached are not only immediate solutions but are sustainable for the future. Every detail will be scrutinized carefully, and there will be a collective effort to avoid hasty or poorly planned decisions. On a broader scale, Saturn's presence in Pisces emphasizes humanitarian needs, especially in regions like Gaza, Syria, and Yemen, which are still suffering from conflict and instability. The trine with Mercury suggests that governments, in collaboration with global organizations like the Red Cross, the Arab League, and the World Health Organization, will focus on rebuilding efforts. The discussion will likely include the restoration of health services, rebuilding of infrastructure, and stabilization of social services. Saturn ensures that these efforts will not be superficial but deeply rooted in long-term strategies for stability. For countries like Iran and Lebanon, this trine brings a strong push for thoughtful, structured policymaking. Economic reforms and political restructuring may be top priorities, with a clear focus on creating policies that can weather the region's inherent instability. In Iran, educational reforms could also come to the forefront. The influence of Saturn supports disciplined, methodical efforts to improve academic and vocational training systems, which could help the nation build a more sustainable, future-focused educational infrastructure. Mercury retrograde, beginning November 25, 2024, re-evaluation and reflection. As Mercury stations retrograde on November 25, the momentum from earlier in the month slows down, and the focus shifts from progress to reflection. Mercury retrograde is known for bringing disruptions in communication, travel, and trade, and for the Middle East, this could manifest as delays or complications in ongoing negotiations and agreements. The Israel-Gaza conflict, which may have seen progress under the Saturn-Mercury trine, could face setbacks due to miscommunications or misunderstandings between the negotiating parties. This period may force mediators and leaders to revisit previous agreements, double-checking details to ensure that nothing critical has been overlooked. Mercury retrograde also brings a time of reassessment in key areas such as communication infrastructure and trade. For countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia, which rely heavily on oil exports, trade disruptions could occur, potentially affecting the stability of global trade routes. The economic impact of these disruptions may prompt leaders to reconsider their trade policies, making adjustments to secure more reliable, long-term trading relationships. Travel restrictions and diplomatic delays are also likely during this period, adding further challenges to international diplomacy. Additionally, educational reforms, which may have gained momentum earlier in the month, could face delays or re-evaluations during Mercury's retrograde phase. Middle Eastern governments may be prompted to reassess their goals for international collaboration and student exchanges, ensuring that their educational advancements align with their long-term vision for development. This retrograde period offers a valuable opportunity for introspection, encouraging leaders to refine and improve existing policies rather than rush forward with new initiatives. A time of patience and reevaluation. As the region moves from the structured communication of the Saturn-Mercury trine into the introspective phase of Mercury retrograde, there is a noticeable shift in energy. The forward momentum of negotiations, trade, and educational reforms slows, and the focus turns inward. Leaders and diplomats will need to exercise patience and take a methodical approach to any challenges that arise. While this retrograde phase may cause temporary delays, it also offers an opportunity to reflect on and strengthen the foundations laid earlier in the month, ensuring that long-term solutions are both practical and sustainable. In the face of potential disruptions, the key will be to embrace the retrograde's lessons, to review, reassess, and refine. With patience and discipline, the region can navigate this period of reflection and emerge stronger, with more robust policies and agreements that can endure the challenges ahead. The insights gained during this time will be critical in shaping the future of the Middle East as it continues to evolve and respond to both internal and global pressures. November 2024, Uranus-Pluto trine and Neptune-Pluto sextile, a period of profound transformation. As November draws to a close, the astrological landscape is dominated by the powerful trine between Uranus in Taurus and Pluto in the final degrees of Capricorn, along with a harmonious sextile between Neptune and Pluto. These aspects usher in a time of deep transformation, especially for the economic and political foundations of the Middle East. This is not a period for superficial change but rather a profound restructuring of financial systems, governance, and social services, with long-term implications. The Uranus-Pluto trine, particularly impactful for resource-dependent economies like Iran and Saudi Arabia, encourages innovation and radical shifts in how these nations manage their wealth. With Uranus in Taurus, the focus is on sustainability and technological advancements in sectors like agriculture, energy, and resource management. Countries that have historically relied on oil revenues may now be pushed to embrace renewable energy sources and other sustainable economic models. The long-term stability of these nations depends on their ability to adapt to shifting global markets, particularly as the world pivots toward green technologies and more equitable resource distribution. For Israel and Gaza, the Uranus-Pluto trine could signal a turning point in long-term recovery and rebuilding efforts. This aspect supports the implementation of large-scale infrastructure projects, humanitarian aid, and economic recovery plans, with the help of international organizations like the World Bank and the IMF. The influence of Uranus in Taurus favors innovative solutions, such as adopting advanced technologies in agriculture or clean energy, which could revitalize economies weakened by conflict. Countries like Lebanon, similarly, may find opportunities to modernize their infrastructure and diversify their economies under this transformative influence. The Neptune-Pluto sextile brings a spiritual and humanitarian dimension to this period of restructuring. Neptune, still retrograde in Pisces, challenges leaders to focus on the collective good, emphasizing compassion and social responsibility over individual power or nationalistic ambitions. This influence is particularly relevant for nations like Syria and Yemen, where humanitarian crises continue to unfold. The sextile suggests that this is a time for reforming social services and charitable organizations, with a focus on addressing deep-rooted issues like poverty, displacement, and healthcare access. However, Neptune's retrograde may expose weaknesses in current governance structures, forcing governments to confront the inefficiencies, corruption, or lack of accountability within their systems. Leaders in these regions may feel pressured to reform not only how they govern but also how they engage with the international community, focusing more on humanitarian needs and less on self-serving policies. Jupiter retrograde in Gemini, rethinking diplomacy and education. Throughout November, Jupiter's retrograde in Gemini calls for introspection and reevaluation, particularly in areas related to communication, diplomacy, and education. For the Middle East, this retrograde brings a period of reflection, as governments reconsider their foreign policies, trade agreements, and internal reforms. Jupiter's influence in Gemini highlights the need to refine and clarify diplomatic strategies, especially in multilateral negotiations where miscommunications may have led to misunderstandings or delays. In the context of the Israel-Gaza conflict, this retrograde may slow down diplomatic efforts, prompting both sides to reassess their approach to peace talks. The focus shifts from aggressive negotiation to a more thoughtful review of past agreements and strategies. While this may cause temporary delays, the retrograde period provides an opportunity for leaders to reflect on their long-term goals and recalibrate their positions to align with more sustainable solutions. The retrograde also brings attention to educational systems across the Middle East, particularly in countries like Iran and Lebanon. Governments may find themselves reconsidering national education policies, with an emphasis on balancing local needs with global standards. Jupiter in Gemini encourages educational exchanges and intellectual growth, but during its retrograde, nations may experience delays in implementing reforms or face challenges in aligning their educational systems with international frameworks. This period of reassessment, however, is crucial for ensuring that future reforms are well considered and capable of fostering long-term development. Global implications, reevaluating communication and trade. Jupiter retrograde in Gemini also impacts global communication networks and trade agreements. For nations heavily reliant on exports, such as Iran and Saudi Arabia, this retrograde could signal a time to revisit trade policies and clarify international partnerships. Miscommunications may become more frequent, especially in multilateral forums, as different parties struggle to align their positions. Trade routes, especially those connected to oil and other critical resources, may face disruptions, forcing governments to rethink their strategies for maintaining stable economic relationships. This period is also significant for multilateral diplomacy, where negotiations between multiple nations may encounter obstacles due to unclear communication or conflicting interests. Diplomatic representatives will need to exercise patience and diligence, revisiting past agreements and ensuring that all details are thoroughly understood by all parties involved. While this retrograde may cause temporary frustrations, it ultimately serves as a reminder of the importance of clear, transparent communication in international relations. November 2024, Neptune and Uranus retrograde, revealing truths and reshaping economies. As November progresses, Neptune retrograde in Pisces and Uranus retrograde in Taurus create a complex atmosphere of disruption and reflection, especially in governance, finance, and sustainability across the Middle East. These retrograde planets emphasize the exposure of hidden truths and the need for deep reform. Neptune retrograde in Pisces continues to strip away illusions, revealing flaws and deceptions within governmental and economic institutions. In countries like Iran, Lebanon, and Syria, this may manifest as public outcry against long-standing corruption or inefficiency. As hidden issues within governance structures come to light, there may be a surge of public demand for transparency and reform. Governments in these regions will likely face pressure to address these newly uncovered problems, especially as citizens grow increasingly frustrated with stagnant leadership and unfulfilled promises. Neptune retrograde also emphasizes humanitarian crises, highlighting the need for better social services, healthcare, and aid distribution in conflict-ridden areas like Syria and Gaza. Uranus retrograde in Taurus, meanwhile, continues to disrupt financial systems, especially in economies heavily reliant on natural resources such as oil and agriculture. Nations like Iran and Saudi Arabia, whose wealth and stability are deeply tied to the global oil market, may feel the impact of these disruptions acutely. Uranus challenges these nations to rethink their long-term economic strategies. As the world shifts toward renewable energy and sustainability, the reliance on fossil fuels becomes increasingly precarious. Countries in the region may need to innovate rapidly to maintain financial stability, adopting new technologies and exploring alternative economic models that prioritize sustainability. This period may also bring agricultural challenges to the fore. Disruptions in supply chains and food production could force governments to rethink their approach to resource management, particularly as climate change continues to impact the region. Uranus retrograde encourages innovation in agriculture, perhaps through the adoption of cutting-edge technologies such as vertical farming or water conservation systems, which could help ensure food security in an increasingly uncertain global environment. Pluto in Capricorn, the final stages of transformation. As Pluto lingers in the final degrees of Capricorn throughout late 2024, the Middle East finds itself on the brink of a significant long-term transformation in governance and power structures. Pluto's slow but intense journey through Capricorn has been marked by political upheavals and revolutions across the globe, including the Middle East. Over the past decade, regimes have toppled, and traditional power structures have been challenged. Now, as Pluto prepares to enter Aquarius in 2025, the region is entering the final phase of this transformative period. Pluto's influence in Capricorn has forced the dismantling of outdated systems of governance, creating space for new forms of leadership and social organization to emerge. In countries like Lebanon, Iran, Syria, and even Saudi Arabia, where political tensions and calls for reform have been simmering, this final push from Pluto may see the completion of major power shifts. Governments may either adapt to the changing landscape, embracing more progressive and inclusive leadership models, or face continued resistance from their populations. The impending transition of Pluto into Aquarius suggests that the Middle East is on the cusp of a new era, one characterized by collective innovation, social progress, and a redefined global order. Aquarius is a forward-thinking sign, associated with technological advancement, humanitarian efforts, and egalitarian values. The region may begin to embrace more collective forms of governance, prioritizing social justice, innovation, and cooperation over authoritarian control. This shift could pave the way for more democratic structures, progressive policies, and an openness to global collaboration. Looking forward, the dawn of a new era. As the astrological aspects between November 22-30, 2024, unfold, the Middle East stands at a critical juncture, facing both challenges and opportunities. The Saturn-Mercury trine fosters structured, disciplined communication, offering a period for serious negotiations and long-term planning. This is a time when peace talks and diplomatic efforts, particularly in the Israel-Gaza conflict, could see real progress, grounded in practicality and mutual benefit. At the same time, Mercury retrograde calls for reflection and reassessment, particularly in diplomacy, education, and communication infrastructure. Miscommunications or misunderstandings may arise, especially in multilateral negotiations, but this retrograde also provides an opportunity to revisit and refine past agreements, ensuring that they are built on a solid foundation. The Uranus-Pluto trine and Neptune-Pluto sextile are powerful drivers of transformation, particularly in financial systems and governance. The region is being called to innovate and embrace new economic models that prioritize sustainability, while also addressing deep-rooted humanitarian and social issues. The retrograde influences of Neptune and Uranus push governments to confront the flaws in their institutions and make the necessary reforms to ensure long-term stability and prosperity. As Pluto nears the end of its journey through Capricorn, the Middle East stands on the threshold of a new era. The final months of 2024 are a time of reflection, rebuilding, and restructuring, laying the groundwork for the transformative energies of Pluto in Aquarius, which will bring collective innovation, social progress, and a reimagined global order. The choices made now, both by governments and by their people, will shape the region's trajectory for decades to come, setting the stage for a future defined by greater equality, technological advancement, and collaborative governance. Africa's transformative November. The stars align for political shifts, resource control, and social awakening. November 2024 brings a celestial symphony over Africa, casting a dynamic light on political, economic, and social landscapes. As the planets move, so too do the forces driving transformation across this vast continent. The interplay between Scorpio's intensity and Saturn's measured influence will shape the destiny of African nations in ways both visible and hidden, with every planetary motion echoing through governance, natural resources, and grassroots movements. This is not just a month of change, it's a reckoning, a time when the threads of the past are woven into the fabric of Africa's future. November 1, 2024, Sun and New Moon in Scorpio trine Saturn in Pisces, sextile Mercury, a silent revolution begins. As the new moon rises in the enigmatic sign of Scorpio, Africa stands at the precipice of a silent yet profound transformation. Scorpio's energy, fierce and unwavering, taps into Africa's hidden reservoirs of power, signaling a time when political strategies and economic reforms will be solidified behind closed doors. Imagine a wave beneath the surface, unseen yet undeniably powerful. Nations like Nigeria, South Africa, and Angola, known for their resource wealth, may now strategize their control over vital assets like minerals, oil, and water with greater assertiveness. Saturn's trine to this potent new moon whispers of stability, urging African leaders to establish governance that is not just reactive but visionary. Governments across the continent, from the bustling streets of Lagos to the highland plateaus of Ethiopia, may turn toward building sustainable policies that fortify their nations against future crises. The African Union and AFCFTA will find themselves at the heart of these discussions, with agreements that stretch beyond immediate concerns toward long-term resource equity and economic justice. Mercury's gentle sextile injects diplomacy into these critical decisions. Conversations between African governments and international bodies may open discreetly, perhaps on the sidelines of global summits or within the walls of regional councils. Expect trade agreements focusing on sustainable agriculture and infrastructure to emerge, fostering cooperation that extends beyond mere rhetoric. Yet, the full scope of these developments may not be unveiled until later, leaving the world to speculate on the moves taking place in the shadows. November 3, 2024, Mercury in Sagittarius, expanding horizons, rekindling hope. As Mercury soars into Sagittarius, Africa's voice becomes bolder and more expansive, echoing across global forums. This planetary shift signals a renewed focus on diplomacy, education, and economic reform, with the continent's leaders stepping into the world stage, eager to craft a new narrative. The air is thick with ambition. Kenya, Ethiopia, and Ghana rise as intellectual pioneers, pushing forward educational reforms that aim to bridge the digital divide, igniting dreams of a tech-savvy future for the next generation. At the same time, trade talks intensify within regional bodies like the East African Community and Southern African Development Community. Legal frameworks that govern intellectual property and cross-border commerce are poised for a renaissance, ensuring that Africa stands as an equal player in the global economy. However, as Mercury dances through Sagittarius, there's a risk of overpromising. Optimistic declarations of debt relief or trade concessions may hit the headlines, but will the fine print hold up under scrutiny? Time will tell. Still, the optimism of Sagittarius kindles hope, even as it challenges leaders to temper their enthusiasm with realism. Africa's story, written under the watchful eye of the stars, is one of resilience and potential, where the seeds of today's efforts may take root in the coming months, changing the landscape forever. Echoes of change, the broader picture. As November unfolds, the planets continue their cosmic dance, each movement stirring something deeper within Africa's soul. Across the continent, social movements simmer, driven by the need for justice, equality, and economic fairness. Grassroots organizations in countries like South Africa may intensify their calls for land reforms, while environmental groups push back against exploitative practices that threaten their homelands. The celestial forces in play suggest that Africa's people, much like its leaders, are beginning to harness their collective power. There is an unmistakable sense that what happens here will not remain contained within Africa's borders. Just as the Nile flows northward into the Mediterranean, so too will Africa's influence ripple outward, touching the rest of the world. The decisions made today, whether in trade agreements, political reforms, or environmental stewardship, will resonate far beyond the continent's shores, shaping global conversations for years to come. November 5, 2024. Mars in Leo, the flame of leadership burns bright. As Mars blazes into the regal sign of Leo, Africa's leadership awakens with an unmistakable fire, driving ambition, and a renewed sense of pride. Picture a continent where leaders stand tall, emboldened by this fierce energy, ready to make bold and creative strides in both politics and economics. From the bustling streets of Cairo to the vibrant capitals of Lagos and Johannesburg, African nations feel the surge of Leo's influence, pushing them to claim their rightful place on the global stage. This is a time when African leaders, particularly those from Egypt, Nigeria, and South Africa, step forward with unapologetic assertiveness. They may showcase their country's ambitions through visionary infrastructure projects that capture international attention, or assert their dominance in foreign policy discussions within the African Union and beyond. Mars in Leo fuels a competitive spirit, but not all of it is harmonious. Power struggles within nations, especially those facing upcoming elections or political unrest, could intensify, creating a charged atmosphere ripe for change. On a broader scale, Mars' assertiveness may ripple through Africa's geopolitical landscape. Long-standing disputes, such as the Nile water conflict or territorial tensions in the Sahel region, could flare up as nations assert control over precious resources. Military presence along contested borders may increase as countries vie for influence. It is a time of both opportunity and risk. African nations can emerge stronger, but the flames of ambition, if not managed with care, could lead to escalations and standoffs. November 12, 2024. Venus in Capricorn, a time for strategic investments. Venus, the planet of harmony and finance, enters the disciplined and pragmatic sign of Capricorn, casting a cool, calculated gaze over Africa's economic strategies. In stark contrast to Mars' fiery drive, Venus in Capricorn brings a grounded, long-term vision to the table. African leaders are no longer just dreaming of growth, they are strategizing with precision, ensuring that the steps they take today will lead to sustainable, resilient economies in the future. This is a time of sober financial negotiations. Expect African nations to engage with global financial giants like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, not with desperation but with careful planning. Countries like Rwanda and Botswana, known for their meticulous and forward-thinking policies, could emerge as shining examples of how to secure global partnerships for large-scale, sustainable projects. Whether it's renewable energy, agriculture, or infrastructure, the focus is on building lasting, strategic relationships that will support Africa's long-term economic stability. The African Development Bank, AFDB, will likely play a pivotal role, facilitating high-stakes negotiations that could determine the continent's financial future. Venus in Capricorn encourages African nations to prioritize partnerships that offer not just immediate benefits but sustainable gains for generations. The time for quick fixes is over. African leaders are looking to the horizon, shaping a future where economic growth is intertwined with environmental responsibility and resource management. The seeds of resilience are being sown under Venus's steady hand, offering hope that Africa's rise will be both steady and lasting. November 15, 2024. Saturn direct in Pisces, healing through pragmatic reform. As Saturn stations direct in Pisces, the celestial tides turn, rekindling Africa's momentum toward meaningful social reforms. It's as if the brakes are being released after a long, reflective pause. This shift sets the stage for long overdue advancements in healthcare, education, and social services, particularly in nations grappling with systemic challenges like Ethiopia and Sudan. Saturn's return to forward motion ushers in a wave of disciplined governance, blending compassion with structure, and those humanitarian goals that once seemed elusive now feel within reach. For countries with fragile healthcare systems, this could mark a turning point, as international organizations like the World Health Organization, WHO, and the African Union, (OAU), step in to bolster reforms. Imagine clinics and hospitals, once overburdened, now receiving the resources and support they desperately need. This period will also focus on restoring the social fabric through the restructuring of public institutions, weaving together the threads of empathy and accountability. In the face of humanitarian crises, from poverty to disease outbreaks, African leaders will be called upon to implement policies that not only alleviate immediate suffering but also lay the groundwork for sustainable, long-term improvement. Full moon in Taurus, illuminating wealth and resources. The full moon rising in the earthy sign of Taurus casts its luminous light on Africa's material wealth and natural resources, spotlighting the continent's economic engines. Taurus, the sign of stability and wealth, demands a rethinking of how resources like oil in Nigeria, gold in Ghana, and minerals in South Africa are managed. These nations, deeply intertwined with global commodity markets, will find themselves at a critical juncture. The energy of the full moon pulls them into a moment of reckoning. How can they transition from exploitation to sustainable stewardship? Under the gaze of the full moon, African leaders will grapple with the volatility of global markets, reassessing their strategies in sectors like agriculture, energy, and mining. The African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, could emerge as a key player in this transformation, promoting regional cooperation and stabilizing economies. Food security and energy independence will likely dominate the conversation, as leaders realize the old models of wealth extraction no longer serve in an increasingly interconnected and environmentally conscious world. This full moon does not merely illuminate problems, it calls for solutions grounded in Taurus practical energy. As the tides of global demand shift, African nations may find themselves compelled to prioritize sustainability, ensuring that future generations benefit from the wealth of the land. Jupiter-Saturn square, expansion meets restriction. A cosmic tension crackles in the air as Jupiter squares Saturn, pitting Africa's desire for growth against the sobering reality of economic limitations. This square is like a tug-of-war between optimism and caution, and African nations will need to walk a fine line between pursuing ambitious development projects and exercising fiscal restraint. The temptation to overextend, whether through large-scale investments in education, media, or legal reforms, will be strong, but Saturn's presence demands careful planning and measured execution. Jupiter retrograde in Gemini complicates the situation, introducing the possibility of miscommunications and financial miscalculations. It's a time when promises made in international trade agreements or foreign aid negotiations could fall short of expectations. African leaders will need to be strategic, avoiding the lure of rapid expansion that could lead to financial missteps. There's a real risk of overpromising on development projects that may not fully materialize, and this could spark social unrest or deepen existing tensions if expectations aren't managed properly. Despite these challenges, the Jupiter-Saturn square can also serve as a reality check, an opportunity for African nations to recalibrate their growth strategies. This aspect encourages leaders to look beyond short-term gains and focus on building sustainable foundations that can support long-term prosperity. It's a balancing act, but for those who can navigate these cosmic currents wisely, the rewards could be transformative. Mid-November 2024, Saturn-Uranus sextile, tradition meets innovation. In mid-November, the stars align to bring Africa an exceptional opportunity with the Saturn-Uranus sextile. This harmonious aspect between the planet of structure and the planet of innovation is like a master architect meeting a visionary engineer. Together, they lay the foundation for African nations to blend their rich traditions with cutting-edge technological advancements, driving sustainable progress across the continent. Countries that have already made strides in technological fields, such as Kenya with its revolutionary mobile banking systems or Rwanda's sustainability initiatives, stand poised to lead this new wave of innovation. Expect breakthroughs in agricultural practices, where technology is used to enhance crop yields, improve irrigation, and combat food insecurity. It's a perfect fusion of old and new, where ancestral knowledge of the land meets state-of-the-art techniques, ensuring that Africa's agricultural backbone grows stronger in the face of modern challenges. Renewable energy, too, takes center stage. The sun-soaked plains of the Sahara and the coastal winds of Africa's shores present endless possibilities. Under this sextile, nations may deepen their investment in solar and wind farms, turning the dream of clean energy into a widespread reality. With climate change looming large, the continent is preparing to take bold, innovative steps to secure its future. The African Development Bank, AFDB, already a key player, is likely to ramp up its role, funneling resources into projects that promise not just immediate benefits, but long-term resilience. This sextile represents a time when Africa's traditional strengths are empowered by modern solutions, creating a robust defense against the crises of tomorrow. Jupiter-Uranus sextile, bold visions and breakthroughs. As if to build on this momentum, the Jupiter-Uranus sextile bursts onto the scene with the energy of rapid innovation and bold, forward-thinking change. Africa's leaders, emboldened by this aspect, will push the envelope on technological advancements and economic restructuring, driven by the urgency to address persistent inequalities and bring sustainable growth to their nations. This transit could see African countries doubling down on efforts to diversify their economies. The continent's reliance on raw materials, oil, gold, minerals, has often made it vulnerable to market volatility. But under Jupiter's expansive gaze, African nations may accelerate their pivot toward industries of the future: digital finance, technology, and renewable energy. Smart cities, with modern infrastructure and tech-driven solutions, may begin to rise in urban centers across the continent, offering new hope to growing populations. Innovation in healthcare and climate technology may also gain a boost, positioning Africa as a leader in fields that address both regional and global challenges. African scientists and engineers could make significant strides in managing the effects of climate change, from sustainable water use to renewable energy sources that help mitigate environmental degradation. In healthcare, the continent may see advancements in public health systems, with a focus on digital solutions to increase accessibility and efficiency. Collaborations with global entities like the United Nations and the World Bank will be crucial. These partnerships could unlock new funding streams and open doors for African innovations to be showcased on the global stage, further cementing the continent's role as a driver of meaningful change. The Jupiter-Uranus sextile is a time of bold visions, of taking risks to break new ground, and for Africa, it signals a period of profound and rapid growth, particularly in areas that will define its future resilience. November 17–18, 2024, Mercury trine Jupiter, expanding horizons and diplomatic influence. As Mercury forms a trine with Jupiter, a powerful wave of optimism and intellectual growth sweeps across Africa. This harmonious alignment fuels cross-cultural exchanges, fostering deeper connections between African nations and the world. Think of it as a breath of fresh air, a moment where dialogue, negotiation, and knowledge-sharing thrive, especially in the fields of education, communication, and media. Countries like Kenya and Ghana, already experiencing rapid growth in their tech sectors, may lead the charge in implementing educational reforms designed to expand access to digital learning. This aspect encourages African nations to think bigger, to envision a future where technology bridges the gap between urban and rural education, bringing opportunities to even the most remote regions. Conversations about global media partnerships could also intensify, positioning nations such as South Africa and Nigeria as emerging hubs for international media production and intellectual exchange. Diplomatic negotiations with international bodies, including the United Nations, UN, African Union, and African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, will flow smoothly under Mercury's influence. Trade agreements, media initiatives, and educational collaborations will take on new momentum. With the support of Mercury and Jupiter's intellectual synergy, African leaders are poised to secure deals that will enhance the continent's role in global education and media landscapes. And in these moments, Africa's diplomatic voice will resonate louder, with leaders from South Africa, Nigeria, and beyond stepping into global forums to broker meaningful partnerships that promise sustainable development and intellectual growth for years to come. Saturn-Venus trine, stability in finance and diplomacy. The trine between Saturn and Venus brings a much-needed sense of stability and focus to Africa's financial and diplomatic landscape. Venus, the planet of resources and partnerships, joins hands with Saturn's discipline, laying the groundwork for solid, long-term economic agreements. African nations will likely secure international investments aimed at infrastructure, renewable energy, and agricultural development, investments not driven by short-term profit, but by lasting growth and resilience. Countries like Rwanda and Botswana, known for their prudent economic management, may be at the forefront of these efforts. Their stable economic policies could attract significant foreign investments, further strengthening their positions as African leaders in financial stability and sustainable growth. The African Development Bank, AFDB, and the African Union, O, will play pivotal roles in facilitating these partnerships, ensuring that the continent's economic trajectory aligns with long-term sustainability rather than fleeting gains. Diplomatically, this trine fosters a peaceful, constructive atmosphere that could help resolve long-standing conflicts. In regions like the Sahel or the Horn of Africa, where political instability and conflict have taken their toll, Saturn's influence provides the discipline needed to broker lasting peace agreements. International peacekeeping bodies, in collaboration with African leaders, may seize this moment to negotiate solutions that prioritize stability and security, ushering in a new era of cooperation across the continent. Neptune-Sun trine, a compassionate vision for Africa's future. The trine between Neptune and the Sun brings a gentle, spiritual influence to Africa's leadership, awakening a collective sense of compassion and humanitarianism. This aspect calls for a renewed focus on social justice, poverty alleviation, and environmental sustainability, goals that align perfectly with Africa's broader vision of progress. During this time, African leaders may be inspired to enact policies that go beyond mere political gain, focusing instead on the well-being of their people. Countries like Senegal and Ethiopia, known for their rich traditions of social justice, could lead the charge in reforms that address healthcare, education, and environmental concerns. Picture leaders who are not only politically savvy but also guided by a deeper sense of duty to their citizens, balancing governance with empathy. The influence of Neptune and the Sun also strengthens Africa's role in global humanitarian initiatives. Expect increased collaboration between African nations and international organizations like the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, as they work together to address challenges related to climate change, food security, and public health. These efforts will be in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, as African nations commit to long-term strategies that prioritize collective well-being and environmental stewardship. Moreover, the spiritual and cultural leaders of the continent may rise to greater prominence during this period, offering wisdom and guidance. In a world increasingly driven by material concerns, Africa could become a beacon of holistic and inclusive governance, demonstrating that compassion and pragmatic solutions can coexist in creating a brighter, more sustainable future. November 22, 2024, Sun and Sagittarius, expanding Africa's diplomatic horizons. As the Sun strides into Sagittarius, Africa enters a season of optimism, expansion, and global outreach. The energy of Sagittarius, a sign that thrives on exploration and diplomacy, signals a time when African leaders will lean into internationalism, seeking to expand their influence on the global stage. This transit shines a light on diplomacy, legal reform, and intellectual growth, encouraging African nations to step up their participation in international forums and trade negotiations. Picture South Africa, Kenya, and Ghana, nations already established as diplomatic powerhouses, taking the lead in forming new alliances. These countries, with their deep involvement in global organizations like the United Nations, UN, African Union, O, and African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, will seize the opportunity to broker fresh trade agreements and deepen existing partnerships. Under Sagittarius' watchful gaze, expect these countries to engage in discussions that shape not just Africa's future, but global dynamics as well. The themes of justice and fairness woven into Sagittarius energy could also spark new legal reforms aimed at curbing corruption and promoting transparency across the continent. On the home front, the Sun in Sagittarius promotes intellectual pursuits and educational reforms. Nations like Rwanda, with its focus on technological advancement, might launch new programs aimed at increasing digital literacy and integrating cutting-edge technology into educational systems. Expect to see efforts aimed at improving access to higher education, expanding literacy programs, and perhaps even discussions around updating educational curricula to better align with the demands of a globalized world. In many African countries, this is also a time when justice and legal reform will be key themes. Nations striving to overhaul outdated laws or address systemic issues like corruption may use this period to advance legislation designed to bring greater fairness and equity to governance. As leaders seek to modernize judicial systems and ensure the rule of law, this transit will support those efforts, giving momentum to reforms that have been long overdue. Moon in Leo, the heart of leadership and national pride. Simultaneously, the Moon moves into Leo, magnifying the emotional intensity surrounding leadership and public figures across Africa. Leo's regal energy places leaders directly in the spotlight, where they will either rally their people with charisma or face fierce scrutiny from an emotionally charged populace. Expect public sentiment to be at a peak, with citizens demanding bold and creative leadership that reflects their national pride and sovereignty. In countries where political transitions are underway, such as Zimbabwe or Ethiopia, the Moon in Leo could intensify nationalistic fervor, sparking both celebrations and protests. Leo's influence on the Moon stirs powerful emotional reactions, and any perceived failure in leadership could lead to widespread demonstrations or social movements. This period could mark a defining moment for leaders who embody the traits of Leo: confidence, creativity, and boldness, allowing them to inspire their nations and foster unity. On the other hand, those who falter under pressure may find themselves the target of public discontent. National pride will be a driving force during this time, and many governments may turn to symbolic acts of leadership to rally support. Large-scale national events, inspiring public speeches, and patriotic displays will become tools for leaders seeking to unite their citizens under a common cause. The Moon in Leo encourages governments to embrace theatricality and spectacle, recognizing the power of symbols in fostering national unity. This is also a time when public expectations of leadership are heightened. The people will be more vocal, expressing their desires for strong, forward-thinking governance. Leaders who engage the public with sincerity and vision will likely find themselves bolstered by popular support. However, in countries where political instability looms, the heightened emotional intensity of the Moon in Leo could fan the flames of dissent, particularly if the public feels let down by those in power. Leo rising at the Sun's ingress, a bold projection of leadership. As the Sun enters Sagittarius with Leo rising, African nations will feel the need to boldly assert their independence and sovereignty. This astrological configuration magnifies Africa's leadership presence on the global stage, pushing countries to showcase their strength, resilience, and potential. Like the lion itself, nations may feel emboldened to roar, displaying their confidence and determination to shape their futures. Countries that have been working to redefine their international roles, particularly within organizations like the Southern African Development Community, SADC, and the East African Community, EAC, are likely to take decisive steps during this period. Leaders may initiate bold diplomatic moves, focusing on strategic partnerships that highlight Africa's growing influence in areas like renewable energy, digital innovation, and regional peacekeeping. The alignment of Leo rising during this ingress enhances the continent's leadership potential, positioning African nations as key players in global forums. Expect a surge in national pride as well, with leaders striving to inspire their populations through powerful public speeches and symbolic gestures. It's a time when African nations will stand tall, projecting a vision of sovereignty and self-reliance, aiming to carve out a distinctive identity in international affairs. The energy of Leo demands visibility, so African leaders may seize this moment to capture the world's attention through initiatives that position their countries as innovators and peacekeepers in the international arena. Taurus midheaven, grounding national pride with practical prosperity. While Leo rising stokes the flames of leadership and charisma, the Taurus midheaven grounds this energy with a focus on practical concerns like financial stability and sustainable resource management. Taurus, a sign known for its stability and connection to the earth, reminds African nations that true leadership isn't just about bold moves. It's about ensuring long-term prosperity and security for their people. For resource-rich nations like Nigeria, Angola, and South Africa, the Taurus midheaven brings attention to the delicate balance between showcasing national pride and managing the practical realities of their economies. These countries may need to focus on the careful extraction and management of natural resources, ensuring that their wealth benefits the broader population without causing environmental or economic instability. Discussions around resource equity, agricultural reform, and infrastructure development will take center stage, with an eye toward creating sustainable growth that aligns with the continent's long-term goals. This is a period when leaders will be expected to deliver tangible results. The energy of Taurus demands practicality. Nations will be judged not just by their ambitious declarations but by their ability to ensure economic security and stability. For countries heavily reliant on commodities like oil, gold, or agriculture, there will be pressure to manage resources wisely, avoiding the pitfalls of market volatility while ensuring sustainable growth. Balancing charisma with responsibility. The combination of Leo's rising influence and Taurus at the midheaven presents both opportunities and challenges for African leaders. On one hand, the public will look to their leaders to embody the confidence, pride, and vision that Leo represents. On the other hand, the Taurus midheaven insists on practicality. Leaders must not only inspire but also produce concrete, measurable outcomes that ensure their nation's long-term stability and prosperity. This balance will be especially critical for nations rich in natural resources. Leaders will need to strike a delicate balance between projecting strength on the international stage and focusing on the down-to-earth tasks of managing their economies and resources. Expect to see discussions around sustainable development intensify, with nations pushing for policies that ensure resource equity and environmental protection while also driving growth. November 22, 2024, Saturn-Mercury trine, structured diplomacy and strategic reforms. The trine between Saturn and Pisces and Mercury in Sagittarius sets the stage for a focused, pragmatic approach to communication, governance, and international negotiations across Africa. This harmonious alignment encourages nations to pursue long-term goals with clarity, patience, and discipline. Saturn's influence in Pisces emphasizes humanitarian efforts and institutional reforms, while Mercury in Sagittarius fosters an environment of intellectual exchange and legal discourse. During this period, African nations may find themselves engaging in complex but fruitful negotiations with global institutions such as the African Union, the United Nations, UN, and the African Development Bank, AFDB. The focus will likely center on key areas such as sustainable development, regional trade, infrastructure, and public health. For countries like Nigeria and Ethiopia, where education and healthcare are pressing issues, this trine provides an opportunity to outline reforms that address long-standing challenges while preparing for future needs. Expect these discussions to be thorough and detail-oriented, with an emphasis on creating agreements that stand the test of time. With Saturn's grounding energy at play, African leaders will be more inclined to seek structured, long-term solutions rather than quick fixes. Institutions like the East African Community, EAC, and the Southern African Development Community, SADC, are likely to play pivotal roles in facilitating regional cooperation, working to ensure that new policies and trade agreements promote economic resilience and social stability across the continent. Education, a crucial aspect of Africa's development strategy, may also see significant advancements during this time. Countries grappling with outdated educational systems could begin planning reforms to integrate technology and improve access to quality education for all. This aspect encourages a sober, realistic approach to these reforms, ensuring that any changes are not only visionary but also practical and achievable. Mercury retrograde, beginning November 25, 2024, a time for reassessment and reflection. As Mercury stations retrograde on November 25, the momentum of forward progress shifts, signaling a time for reflection, reassessment, and fine-tuning. The retrograde period will primarily affect communication, travel, and education, bringing to light overlooked details that need to be addressed. This is a critical moment for African nations to revisit agreements and policies formulated earlier in the month, or even earlier in the year, and make necessary adjustments. In international negotiations, delays and disruptions may surface. Trade routes could encounter logistical challenges, such as transportation bottlenecks or miscommunications across borders. Countries that rely heavily on exports, like Ghana, gold and cocoa, or Kenya, tea and coffee, may need to reassess their trade policies to navigate these temporary obstacles. It's a time for leaders to be flexible and open to revisiting terms and strategies that previously seemed settled. This retrograde period could also impact air travel and transportation networks, potentially leading to revised policies and travel restrictions across the continent. Governments and regional bodies may find themselves reworking travel agreements or addressing issues related to infrastructure and transportation delays. In a broader sense, this could prompt a rethinking of Africa's logistical systems, pushing for more resilient and adaptable networks that can better handle future disruptions. Education, a sector already experiencing rapid change due to technological advancements, will undergo further re-evaluation. Countries that have accelerated digital learning platforms may need to reconsider the effectiveness of their implementation, identifying gaps in accessibility or technology integration. This reassessment will be essential for ensuring that African educational systems are equipped to prepare future generations to thrive in a globalized world. Navigating retrograde, adjusting course for future success. The Mercury retrograde beginning on November 25 serves as a reminder to slow down, review, and recalibrate. African nations that approach this period with patience and a willingness to reassess will emerge stronger. Whether it's fine-tuning trade policies, improving transportation logistics, or refining educational reforms, this is a time for introspection and course correction. While the retrograde may introduce delays and challenges, it also offers the opportunity to catch potential issues before they become larger problems. Nations that take the time to carefully review agreements, policies, and systems will be better positioned to achieve long-term stability and growth once Mercury resumes direct motion. All of November 2024, deep transformation and innovation for Africa. November 2024 brings a powerful astrological alignment that will shape Africa's financial systems, governance structures, and resource management. These transits reflect a moment of deep introspection, transformation, and bold innovation for the continent. The planetary forces in play are calling African nations to rethink their long-standing approaches to agriculture, governance, and diplomacy, while laying the groundwork for sustainable growth in the future. Uranus-Pluto trine, innovating for resilience. The Uranus-Pluto trine signals a time of profound change in Africa's financial and agricultural sectors. Uranus retrograde in Taurus disrupts the old ways of managing commodities and resource-based economies, especially in countries like Angola, oil, and Malawi, tobacco, pushing them to adapt. This planetary energy urges African nations to shift toward more sustainable models, encouraging innovation in key sectors such as agriculture, energy, and finance. Under this influence, expect to see advancements in sustainable farming techniques and renewable energy projects. Countries with fragile agricultural systems may find new ways to improve food security by integrating technology into farming practices. The exploration of alternative financial systems, such as digital currencies or fintech solutions, could also gain traction, as African nations seek to stabilize their economies and increase resilience against global market fluctuations. This aspect creates a fertile environment for breakthroughs in how African countries approach climate change and resource management. Leaders will be called to manage natural resources more efficiently, with a focus on long-term sustainability. The continent's growing investments in solar and wind energy, for example, could help reduce reliance on non-renewable resources, marking a significant step toward securing Africa's economic future. Neptune-Pluto sextile, transforming governance and humanitarian efforts. The Neptune-Pluto sextile brings a wave of idealism and transformation in African governance and humanitarian efforts. Neptune retrograde in Pisces exposes vulnerabilities and inefficiencies within African institutions, forcing governments to confront issues like corruption and weak governance. This period demands greater transparency and accountability, especially in countries where institutional shortcomings have hindered progress. Pluto's influence in the final degrees of Capricorn marks the end of outdated power structures and the beginning of a new era in governance. African nations may experience deep political reforms, with leaders adopting more progressive policies that reflect the needs and aspirations of their people. In countries like South Africa, where corruption and governance challenges have been ongoing concerns, significant steps toward institutional reform could be taken. This sextile also encourages humanitarian efforts, pushing African countries to focus on collective well-being and fair resource distribution. The African Union, (OAU), and international organizations like the United Nations, (UN), are likely to play key roles in supporting these reforms, providing frameworks for transparency, governance, and social equality. As African nations continue their push for the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, expect a renewed focus on alleviating poverty and addressing systemic inequality. Jupiter retrograde in Gemini, reassessing communication and education. Jupiter retrograde in Gemini brings a period of reflection for Africa's communication systems, diplomatic strategies, and educational policies. This retrograde encourages African leaders to reassess their long-term goals in these areas, refining their approaches to ensure alignment with national and regional visions for development. Diplomacy may slow during this time, as leaders focus on clarifying their objectives and revisiting agreements made in earlier negotiations. African nations might use this time to reevaluate their communication strategies with international partners, ensuring that their diplomatic efforts support broader goals for economic growth and social progress. In terms of education, this retrograde pushes African nations to rethink how they deliver learning, particularly in underserved and remote areas. The focus on inclusivity and access to technology will become more critical, as countries consider how to expand digital education platforms and address media freedoms. Expect discussions about media censorship, misinformation, and the role of education in empowering the next generation to navigate global challenges. Uranus retrograde in Taurus, disrupting resource management. Uranus retrograde in Taurus continues to challenge Africa's financial sectors, particularly those tied to agriculture and natural resources. Countries like Nigeria, which rely on oil, and Zambia, which depends on copper, will need to rethink their economic strategies to weather potential volatility in commodity prices. Uranus's influence disrupts traditional models, urging African leaders to adopt innovative policies that prioritize economic stability and sustainability. This retrograde encourages governments to focus on long-term sustainability through eco-friendly agricultural practices and advancements in renewable energy. African nations will need to address environmental concerns more urgently, with climate change and resource depletion becoming increasingly pressing issues. The need for sound land and resource management policies will be paramount, especially as Africa's growing population increases demand for food and energy. Conclusion: a period of reflection and transformation. The astrological aspects of November 2024, culminating with the Saturn-Mercury trine and the disruptive effects of Mercury retrograde, mark a period of introspection, transformation, and innovation for Africa. These planetary influences push African nations to rethink how they approach governance, financial systems, resource management, and education, all while fostering deeper diplomatic ties and humanitarian efforts. The Uranus-Pluto trine and Neptune-Pluto sextile highlight the need for long-term reform in governance and agriculture, driving deep changes that will lay the foundation for a more resilient and sustainable future. Meanwhile, Jupiter retrograde in Gemini and Uranus retrograde in Taurus urge African leaders to reassess their communication, education, and resource management strategies, ensuring they are prepared to meet the challenges of a rapidly changing world. Organizations like the African Union, the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, and the African Development Bank, AFDB, will be crucial in guiding African nations through this transformative period. As Pluto prepares to enter Aquarius in 2025, Africa stands on the brink of a new era, one defined by collective innovation, social progress, and a reimagined role on the global stage. The months ahead will be pivotal, as African nations navigate this astrological landscape with the potential to emerge stronger, more united, and more sustainable than ever before.
November 2024, the dawn of a new world order. As the curtain falls on November 2024, the world stands at the precipice of profound change. This month, so charged with cosmic power, has woven its influence through the fabric of nations, governments, and economies in ways both seen and unseen. It's as if the stars themselves whispered ancient secrets into the ears of those steering the course of history, urging them toward decisions that will ripple through time. And now, as the final days of November slip away, a quiet yet unmistakable shift is felt, one that heralds the birth of a new global era. The month began under the brooding intensity of Scorpio, a sign known for its ability to unearth what has long been buried. Like a river carving its path through stone, Scorpio's influence worked behind the scenes, subtly eroding outdated systems and preparing the ground for something new to emerge. Beneath the surface, global financial systems and political alliances, long plagued by fragility and imbalance, began to realign. Though much of this transformation remained hidden from the public eye, the foundation was laid for seismic shifts to come. By mid-November, the optimism of Sagittarius lit up the heavens, infusing the global stage with a renewed sense of purpose and possibility. International dialogues flourished, fueled by Mercury's passage through Sagittarius, as discussions about law, education, and trade crossed borders and sparked collaboration. Yet, like the flicker of a candle in a drafty room, this progress was not without its challenges. Mercury's retrograde phase, beginning as the month drew to a close, cast a shadow of uncertainty, forcing leaders to reassess their strategies and revisit the fine print of their agreements. The weight of history pressed down upon the world as Venus entered Capricorn, a sign steeped in pragmatism and foresight. Here, under Capricorn's watchful eye, financial negotiations took on a sober tone. No longer were decisions made in haste or with fleeting ambitions. The long-term stability of governance and economy became paramount, with Saturn's direct motion urging nations to commit to reforms that would weather future storms. Like the ancient architects who built empires to withstand centuries, today's leaders began to craft policies that could endure the unpredictable tides of time. Amid this pragmatic caution, Mars in Leo sparked bold political moves. It was a time when leaders rose to the occasion, stepping onto the world stage with charisma and confidence. Yet the lion's roar was not without its challenges. Power struggles erupted, and not all who sought the throne could hold it. In the halls of power, from the grand palaces of Europe to the bustling capitals of Asia, the drama unfolded with intensity, leaving some victorious and others humbled by the fierce tides of political ambition. Perhaps the most tangible influence came with the full moon in Taurus, a celestial spotlight illuminating the pressing issue of resource management. In a world where scarcity and abundance have long dictated the fates of nations, this full moon called attention to the earth itself, the soil, the waters, the wealth beneath our feet. Conversations turned toward sustainability, echoing through the corridors of the United Nations, the World Bank, and beyond, as leaders grappled with the realities of climate change and dwindling resources. Yet, November 2024 was not without its moments of brilliance. The sextiles between Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus ignited sparks of innovation, breakthroughs in technology and sustainability that seemed to emerge as if gifted by the cosmos itself. Like the Renaissance painters who once transformed the canvas of Europe with their visionary genius, today's innovators laid the groundwork for a future where humanity could thrive in harmony with the planet. These aspects urged nations to look forward, to embrace the new and the revolutionary, while balancing the responsibility that comes with growth. As the sun slipped into Sagittarius, national pride surged, and with it, political tensions simmered. The moon in Leo cast a dramatic light on leaders, magnifying their successes and failures alike. Public scrutiny heightened, and across the world, from the streets of Paris to the plazas of Buenos Aires, citizens raised their voices, demanding accountability from those in power. It was a time of reckoning, a moment when the leaders of the world were forced to confront their roles in shaping the future. And yet, beneath all this turbulence, there was a deeper current at work. The Uranus-Pluto and Neptune-Pluto aspects stirred the soul of the world, pushing humanity toward a new understanding of governance and humanitarian efforts. These powerful planetary forces signaled the dawn of a new global order, one where innovation, sustainability, and collective progress would take precedence over the old paradigms of power and control. The world stood at the threshold of transformation, poised to step into an era defined by cautious optimism and bold vision. As Pluto edges ever closer to Aquarius in 2025, the air is thick with anticipation. We find ourselves at the crossroads of history, where the choices made today will echo for generations. The stars have aligned, casting their light on a path that promises innovation, sustainability, and a future built on the shared efforts of humanity. But this is only the beginning. The cosmic dance continues, and as the world moves forward, guided by the celestial rhythms of the universe, the question remains, what will come next? The stage is set, the actors are in place, and the next act promises to be even more transformative, more intriguing, and more important. Stay with us, for the story is far from over. The future awaits.